Someone like to make a motion to call the regular board meeting back to public session, please? Dr. Venator, second. Mrs. Van Stice, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. I would like to call the regular board meeting to order. All board members are present. I'd like to start with asking Mrs. Leatherbarrow if you could please recite and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be advised that in the event of a fire emergency, an evacuation should be necessary. An alarm will sound. Please note all the marked emergency exits and evacuate well away from the building. At this time, we request that everyone turn their cell phones and other electronic devices to silent, please. Thank you. Also at this time, I would like to ask the room for 17 seconds of complete silence, please. 1 second for each of the 17 victims of the February 14th shooting that occurred in Parkland, Florida. Thank you. I'd also like to welcome our new district clerk, Lynn Carey, to the table for her first official board meeting. Would someone like to make a motion to add addendums to the personnel consent agenda, add a second executive session, and approve an agenda as amended, please? Mrs. Beeger, is there a second? Mr. Mecca, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Are there any board acknowledgments that the board would like to make tonight? Mrs. Leatherbarrow.
I'd like to actually acknowledge Amherst Middle School because they recently had a showing of the movie Screenagers, which is a documentary about how technology and handheld devices impact our young people. And I was able to attend that since it's part of our town of Amherst too. I thought it was worth acknowledging.
Thank you. Mr. Mecca.
I'd like to acknowledge the PTSAs for their advocacy on school safety, and I want to put a plug in for tomorrow night's meeting at Maple West, where the PTA will also be discussing the broad topic of school safety.
Any other board members? Okay, great. I'll pause for a moment. As soon as Mrs. Beeger returns to the table here, I will ask her if she could please read the board's public expression statement.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Sure. Welcome to all who have come to observe this regular board meeting. Per policy 1510, the board has set aside 30 minutes for public expression, a time when we invite members of the community to share their ideas and concerns with us. We welcome this opportunity to hear from you. Each person is given up to 3 minutes in which to address the board. You'll be signaled with a yellow flag at 2.5 minutes so that you can conclude your remarks. This is a meeting held in public rather than a public meeting, which means that we will not be engaging in dialogue back with members of the community this evening. Rest assured, we are listening carefully and we take seriously what you have to say. We would also like to ask that you demonstrate respect for us and for one another by speaking right to the issues. Give us your ideas and share your opinions, but not engaging in any personal attack. Thank you for your cooperation. Our first speaker this evening is Maggie Verrill.
Hi, my name is Maggie Verrill, and I'm a junior at Williamsville South. I'd like to speak to the issue of class rank. I strongly believe that class rank should remain in place for the current juniors. Personally, I've been working hard in school in an attempt to make top 10 since my freshman year. And while I understand that that might not be possible, I really would like to see how I do. And it has not simply affected my study habits. I have even taken extra classes and APs. I even chose not to take a lunch so I could fit more classes in every year. And I know I'm not alone in this because many of my classmates have made similar choices. While I understand the concept of phasing out class rank for current freshmen to see if it has a positive impact on those students, it seems unfair to take away class rank from my class because we have been working for this for years under the impression that we would be ranked. For competitive students, this has served as a motivator, and many of us have pushed ourselves to do our very best in school to achieve high rankings. I am aware that much of your research shows that many colleges are no longer placing an emphasis on class rank. However, I went to a college visit at RIT recently, and the first piece of paperwork they handed me had many questions, but one stood out. They specifically asked for my class rank. For those not active in athletics, class rank provides an opportunity for healthy competition. Many students who do not participate in sports are still competitive people who want an outlet to compete with others and improve themselves. While this competition may create stress for some students, stress can come out of any competition, and this isn't used as a reason to eliminate sports in schools. It is too late in the game for you to consider removing the finish line for my 3-year race. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Tori Buford.
Hi, my name is Tori Burford, and I'm currently a junior at Williamsville South. I'm here tonight to discuss class rank as well, and hopefully to compel you to keep it for this year's junior class. While I understand the merits of disposing of class rank, I feel that our situation is unique in that class rank has been a motivator for my fellow juniors for the past 3 years. I know people who have based their scheduling decisions around it, people who've studied the extra time every night for it. I myself have often wondered about where I'll fall in class rank and have been motivated to do my best because of it. Williamsville South has always emphasized the importance of learning and striving for your goals, and class rank is a great acknowledgement of this. In this way, its recognition motivates students to strive for more, and it applies to far more than just the top 10, as people seem to think, because everyone sets different goals for themselves. Some people I've talked to have gone the extra mile to be the top third, others the top 50%, and yes, some the top 10. Getting rid of class rank gets rid of the recognition of something many students have worked hard to excel in and takes away the opportunity to have a number that will help them achieve scholarships and admission into their top schools. Which brings me upon my next point, the effect of class rank on one's future. One of the main reasons people argue against class rank is that it can be a deciding factor in whether one earns a scholarship or if one gets into the college of their choice, as many colleges, especially large state schools, require knowledge of your class rank. Often, only kids in the top percentage of their class qualify for these scholarships and admission into such schools, which many argue is unfair for students, especially those in highly competitive schools. This is a very valid point, and I understand where these people are coming from. However, we are not making this decision on a national level. By this, I mean that those scholarships will still exist and class rank will still be important to those colleges. Only should you rule to disbar class rank for the juniors of Williamsville South, they will no longer be eligible for those scholarships and they'll be less likely to get into those schools. I implore that the board stand by its earlier decision and keep class rank for this year's junior. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Brian Hogan.
Hello, good evening. My name is Brian Hogan, and I'm here seeking Erie One BOCES nomination for Board of Education. I'm a Williamsville resident with children and family in various schools around the district, and I've been teaching for close to 15 years, starting my teaching career in Japan, and extensively working with BOCES as a former Erie One BOCES teacher. I'm very familiar with various programs and services that are offered. I have designed and implemented curriculum alongside administrators and teachers within the organization, and I'm hoping to once again become part of the BOCES organization. I place the education and safety of our students as well as the safety of staff as my #1 priority as a Board of Education member. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Megan Hall.
Hello, my name is Megan Hall. I'm a senior at Williamsville South. I'm the student organizer behind the Walkout at Will South, and I'm an advocate for student safety in schools. Today I'll be discussing our student walkout as well as potential solutions to the issue that we as a nation will indubitably continue to face if we don't take action. Over the past several weeks, I've been working very hard to ensure that our walkout is focused around unity and paying tribute to the lives lost in Parkland, Florida. As student organizers, we have worked together to raise our voices in hopes that something like what happened in Parkland never happens to students in the U.S. again. We as students are looking for a feeling of safety when we step into school. We don't want our educational experience to be plagued by fear. As a result of our feelings on the issue, I created a petition to gauge interest in a student walkout. The support was overwhelming, and I've been working to coordinate students ever since. Tomorrow we will be walking out of classes at 10 a.m. to pay tribute to the lives lost and to protest against unsafe schools. 5 students, myself included, will be speaking, and the protest will be purely peaceful. We are glad to see so many students standing together to change our society, and we would like to thank the district and all of its administrators for listening to our proposals, questions, and ideas regarding the walkout. Because of your help, we can say that our movement has remained successful thus far. We are also very thankful for the parent, alumni, and community support we have been receiving. However, we would like to note that we cannot accommodate anyone who normally would not be on the school campus at our walkout tomorrow morning. While I do know that school safety has become a very politically charged issue, I also know that it is one that concerns everyone in this room. Whether it is because you have children in school, because you yourself are a student, because you're a teacher or administrator, or otherwise. I think we need to work together to find a feasible long-term solution to a problem that has been happening for years. If we don't do something, where does the violence stop? Politics and partisan divide should not hinder progress on an issue so important. We need to remember that compromise changes the world as we know it and that communication is key. When we are considering how to work out our discrepancies on the issue, we really need to be willing to listen. As a student organizer of a movement where the goal is for our voices to be heard, I totally understand why you all feel as though it's important that society values your opinions and concerns. But I've also learned how important it is to listen and compromise with those who disagree. I know that school safety is a difficult issue to work on, and I truly do applaud our district for constantly analyzing this issue year after year. Even without the presence of a tragedy, it has been forefront of the Williamsville Central School District. One idea, though, that I have with regard to new school safety measures could be employing more mental health counselors in our district. Mental health is one of the biggest factors that influence the mass shooting epidemic in the country. I also think we should assemble a task force on school safety that includes students, teachers, parents, and administrators, because I think it's important that everyone's voices are heard, not just those who are in charge, I guess. I would like to thank you all for listening to what I had to say, and I would like to again thank the district and the community. I hope this issue is one we will continue to consider because it affects us daily. As a community, we must gather to say never again.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Nicholas Gossels.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Gossels. I'm a junior at Williamsville East High School. I'm here to speak in favor of keeping class rank for the junior class. For 3 years, myself and many of my junior peers have chosen classes with regards to class rank. Now that we are 3 months away from finally getting the class rank we work for, it may be taken away. This would be completely unfair to the junior class. Please leave the current policy in place. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker for this portion of public expression is Francie Marzik.
Good evening. I'd like to applaud the board for moving forward and being at the forefront of our community in eliminating class rank. I think that it's an amazing thing that, again, we are stepping up and being the leader in these types of choices. And I understand that they're not easy choices. There were a group of parents and I who went to a college night last night. And there were 4 colleges represented. And not one of them mentioned class rank at all when they were speaking about admissions, financial aid, or scholarships. Unsolicited. At the end of the event, I did ask a question, what they thought about class rank. And in their eyes, they said, well, notice we didn't use it. We didn't speak about it. They said that it can be a disservice for students, and that they don't use it in any way. We went up to them and asked them again, specifically, individually about it later, and again, they echoed that. And they went on to say that they understand how amazing a school district Williamsville is. These schools were all local as far as Rochester. One of them was RIT, but the other ones were local. And they said that even though the students that apply from schools outside the area, it's very easy to track which are the good schools and to figure out where children are going to lie. New York State is especially easy because we have regions and we have AP tests and those things. So they felt that it was very easy to figure out where these children lie. I understand that a lot of the current juniors feel that it's being taken away from them. I love that there's a competitive nature to reaching for a goal, but I also think that our schools need to be helping each other. We want the students to work together, to be that unit that rises everybody up together, and that the whole school can rise up rather than just to compete and to figure out who's going to be on top and who's the best. I want us all to rise, and I want all the students in our school to rise together. And I think by eliminating this stress and this level of competition, I think that we can be more inclusive and maybe even happier. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak? Thank you very much.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda and addendums as presented, please? Anyone? Mrs. Van Cise, thank you. Second? Mrs. Leatherbarrow, are there any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, motion carries unanimously. I would like to thank the following retirees for their service to the district. William Doan, Lawrence Bell, grounds worker for 28 years of service. Sharon Pastrick, North High School teacher's aide for the 12 years of service. Maria Deegan, South High School science teacher for 25 years of service. Ellen Felinamore, South High School counselor for 30 years of service. Nancy Ryan, Transit Middle School math teacher for 25 years of service. Tracy Zappia, South High School Lote teacher for 23 years of service. And finally, Anna Sierri, District Office Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Education and Student Services for 21 years of service. Go ahead.
I'd like to introduce the board at this time. She was just approved in the consent agenda as our new labor relations specialist, Molly Cooper. Molly, would you like to come to the podium and introduce yourself and say a few words?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted a quick minute of your time to basically express my appreciation for this opportunity. It's a wonderful opportunity to become a part of your team, and particular thanks, of course, to the board, Dr. McKenna and Dr. Martzloff, and I'm really excited to become a part of your team. Coming from Erie Wambosse's, I'm lucky enough to know exactly how incredible this district is, and I've worked with a lot of the staff here, union leadership, families, and my experience has just been unrivaled. I'm really excited to become a part of the team here and to become another positive asset for your team. So I look forward to meeting everyone individually, but I'm 100% dedicated to this opportunity, and I look forward to meeting you all in the future as we work together as a team. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on February the 13th, 2018? Dr. Benader, is there a second? Mrs. Van Cise, thank you. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Mrs. Vieger.
I think it's been corrected, but just that I was unable to attend the Casey Middle School visit as put on the minutes. I don't know if that was revised, but
Okay.
thank you.
I think also, if I remember right, I think there was a couple names that were incorrect on that. I think Mr. Meyer.
I wound up attending that, but
Okay.
I previously communicated that over to our district clerk.
That's it.
Any other corrections? Okay, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, motion carries unanimously. On Thursday, March 8th, 2018, Mr. Meyer was fortunate to get a VIP tour of the North High School chapter of DECA in action at the State Career Conference competition that occurred in Rochester, New York. Mr. Meyer, would you mind giving us a brief summary of the turn of events, please?
Sure. So I was happy I was able to get some time off work, drove out to Rochester. Thousands of students from all across the state. Unfortunately, they didn't really give us the one-on-one kind of access to students from our schools, but I got to see everyone collectively in action. Vendors from all kinds of colleges and employers, major companies to small companies. Students were doing kind of mock scenarios with employers where they'd work through different kinds of management problems. And everyone there was dressed very professionally. The students were better dressed than me, I'll put it that way. So they showed me up. But it was really great, and I think in terms of that goal of being career or college ready, DEC is a great resource towards that. So I was happy I could be there.
Thank you. An open house program for school board members was held on Thursday, March the 8th, 2018 at 6:15 p.m. At that, Erie 2 BOCES, Mr. Mecca attended. Mr. Mecca, any comments?
Yes, I just submitted my report today, so hopefully that was received. It was a great program. I visited the Erie 1 BOCES equivalent to that. I think it was a year or two ago at Potter's Road. And this, of course, was at the Ormsby Center out across from East Aurora High School. It was a wonderful experience to see all of the CTE, Career and Technical Education programs that are available through Erie 2 BOCES in this case. Spoke to some of the students, talked to them about their career goals. Many of them have landed jobs as a result of the internships, and was just very excited to see the program there.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have anything else to report from the New York State School Board Association? Or the Erie County Association of School Boards? Okay. On Monday, March the 5th, 2018, Dr. McClary, Mr. Meyer, Mrs. Van Cise, and myself visited Casey Middle School. Our next scheduled visitation is the rescheduled East High School visitation for Friday, March the 23rd, 2018 at 7:50 a.m. Take note of the time. It's an odd start time. At the last meeting, Mrs. Beeger and myself were the only two that could confirm. We put down Dr. McClary, Mrs. Vasquez, and Dr. Benader were all maybes. So can the three of you give us more of a heads up which way you could go? Yes.
I can attend.
Dr. McClary is now a yes. Thank you. Mrs. Vasquez or Dr. Benader? Mrs. Vasquez is also a yes now. Dr. Benader, don't mean to put you on the spot.
Made a maybe right now.
Still a maybe? Okay, not a problem.
Sean, if I can add myself to that list, my schedule changed, so I'll be there.
Perfect. I was just going to ask that if there are any other board members that would like to come, so we will put you down. Mr. Meyer, thank you very much. Any other board members? Mrs. Leatherbarrow?
Yep, I can attend.
Awesome. Any other board members? I think we almost have a full board there. Thank you. On Saturday, March the 3rd, 2018, the board held its second and final retreat for this academic year. All board members except Dr. Benader and Mrs. Vasquez were in attendance. Mr. Robert Chrisman and Mr. Vince Coppola facilitated. Moving on, the annual Erie 1 BOCES meeting will be held on Wednesday, April the 11th, 2018 at 7 p.m. at the Erie 1 BOCES offices in West Seneca. They will be presenting their tentative administrative capital and program budgets for the 2018 and 2019 academic year. They will also be reviewing the nominations for the April elections for the 2 board member seats which carry a 3-year term. Section 1950, Subdivision 2 of the New York State Education Law provides that nominations of candidates shall be made by board resolution by component districts at least 30 days before the date designated for voting. Unlike the actual vote, there are no limitations to how many people can be nominated from each member district or how many of those candidates can come from within a given school district. However, only 1 individual can be voted on the board from any given school district. Candidates should be qualified to serve on the board and come from within the BOCES districts itself. Presently, we have 5 candidates who have come forward requesting the board to nominate them for the 2 trustee seats. You have been provided their letters and resumes to be reviewed in your packets. I will ask for someone to please formally make a motion for a candidate to be nominated. I will then look for someone to second it, and then we will vote on that candidate. We'll repeat this process as necessary. Any questions?
Yeah, Sean, can we nominate more than one at the same time? Or are we doing
Yes.
Okay, so I can nominate.
Well, I'm going to ask that you only nominate one person at a time, and then we'll move through the motion of it, and then we'll come back to you for the second nomination and so forth.
All right,
They have very strict guidelines that we have to follow.
that's fine.
Thank you.
Fine.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to open it up. Would someone like to make a motion to nominate a candidate for the Erie 1 BOCES board, please? Mr. Mecca.
I'd like to recommend that we nominate Brian Hogan.
Okay. Mr. Mecca has moved to nominate Mr. Brian Hogan, located at 104 Knoll Drive, Williamsville, New York, 14221, which is located in the Williamsville Central School District, as a candidate for the election to be held on April the 17th, 2018, to serve as a trustee for the Board of Cooperative Educational Services, First Supervisory District of Erie County, and a term beginning July the 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2021. Is there a second? Mrs. Van Cise, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? And please hold your hands high. Opposed? Abstentions? Were you opposing, Mr. Meyer?
No, I wasn't. I'm slow to put my hand down.
Thank you. Okay, motion
Admitted to it,
carries.
so.
Not a problem. Motion carries unanimously. Would someone like to make a motion to nominate another candidate? Sorry, my head's spinning
ahead,
here. Go ahead, Dr. McClary.
I would like to nominate Mr. Ed Cavan. I believe some people pronounce it Cavan.
Do we know which way it is? Is it Cavan?
I've always pronounced it Cavan,
Okay.
but could be Cavan.
Okay. So Dr. McClary has moved to nominate Edward Cavan, the incumbent, located at 252 Willow Green Drive, Amherst, New York, 14228, which is located in the Sweet Home Central School District, as a candidate for the election to be held on April the 17th, 2018, to serve as a trustee for the Board of Cooperative Educational Services, First Supervisory District of Erie County, and a term beginning July the 1st, 2018, through June 30th, 2021. Is there a second? Beeger? Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, motion carries unanimously. Would someone like to make another motion to nominate a candidate for the Erie 1 BOCES?
I move to nominate Elaine Sanders.
Mr. Meyer has moved to nominate Helene Sanders, located at 171 Autumn Creek Court, East Amherst, New York, 14051, which is located in the Williamsville Central School District, as a candidate for the election to be held on April the 17th, 2018, to serve as a trustee for the Board of Cooperative Educational Services, First Supervisory District of Erie County, and a term beginning July the 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2021. Is there a second? Dr. Benader? Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-3-0. Would someone like to make a motion to nominate another candidate for the Erie One BOCES Board? Okay. The board will vote to approve the administrative budget and the election of board members at the special board meeting to be held on April the 17th, 2018 at 6 p.m. in the district office boardroom here. The final board community forum for this academic school year will be held on Saturday, April the 28th, 2018 at 9 a.m. Don't want anybody coming at night on a Saturday. At the South High School cafeteria. What board members are available to attend this event at this time, please? Dr. McClary? Dr. Venator? Mrs. Leatherbarrow? Mrs. Beeger? Mrs. Van Sice? Mr. Meyer? And myself. Great, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt a date, time, place, and approve resolutions for the 2018 annual district vote and authorize public notices as presented? Mrs. Van Sice, thank you very much. Is there a second? Mrs. Beeger, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Just want to double check one thing. Okay, Dr. Martzloff, would you like to give your community update, please?
Thank you, Mr. LeMay. Just a few quick items. As it was mentioned at public expression, some of our students are going to be expressing themselves tomorrow as it relates to school safety and security, as well as in remembrance of the victims in Parkland, Florida. So I want to say thank you to all of our students for the way they've handled this and advocated for themselves, as well as their partnership and collaboration with our school principals, our faculty, and staff. I'm confident that each of our secondary schools will have a smooth day tomorrow and be able to recognize both the remembrance of the students and the importance of sensible changes to the law to help increase school safety and security. So thank you for that. When it comes to school security, a little bit later this evening, we'll be having a joint presentation with the Amherst Police Department. And I just want to mention, not to steal too much thunder from that presentation, but we are so fortunate in Williamsville to have the strong partnership with the Amherst Police Department and the Williamsville Central School District. It is absolutely critical to the safety of children. And when I hear other superintendent colleagues talk about their relationships with their local police departments, really, we are unrivaled here in Williamsville. We talk to folks from the Amherst Police Department pretty much on a daily basis throughout the year, dealing with many different challenges and issues we're faced with and ways to improve things in terms of school security for all our students. So I want to say thank you to the leaders of the Amherst Police Department and really their entire force. Now I said those nice things, Chief Askey and Captain McNamara, you better do a good job in the presentation. There's a little extra pressure. But at any rate, I do very much appreciate their partnership, and that's been long-standing here in Williamsville. And lastly, I want to make mention to everyone, to our community, and to our school district that we're going to be following up with a survey to students later this week on foreign language instruction. In terms of what foreign languages we should consider offering in Williamsville, what additional grade levels we should consider offering them in, what is it that folks think is most important when it comes to that, particularly from the parent point of view. So that'll be going out, I believe, on Friday and be available for a couple of weeks for people to respond. Thank you to Dr. Balin for her work on organizing all of that as well. This concludes my community update at this time.
Thank you. Take a minor step backwards. Mrs. Carey, I apologize. I forgot to come to you to get a update on what am I trying to say? The public notice and vote and candidates and all of that. If you could please give us an update, I'd appreciate it.
Great. Candidate packets are available. We have one packet that has been returned, and the official candidate at this time is Mr. LeMay. So only one official candidate at this time.
Great. Anything else? That's it?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would someone like to make a motion to resolve to adopt and approve the 2018-2019 school student calendar as presented? Mrs. Beeger, thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Van Cise, thank you. Is there any discussion? I will ask one question. I was going to actually ask Dr. Martzloff. Could you let us know how many snow days it seems to be the most important factor other than vacations that we'll have?
Yes, it looks like we'll have 7 snow days built into the calendar for possible use next year. Along with that, I also want to thank Dr. Sierra for her hard work on this particular calendar. Every year she takes the lead on this, and now that she's going to be retiring come October, we have her first consultant job open for her to come back to the district and help with future calendars. But thank you, Dr. Siri, for all your work on that and leadership as well. We appreciate it.
Thank you. So all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, none. Motion carries unanimously. Would someone like to take the revised policies from the table for a second reading and adoption? Mrs. Beeger, is there a second? Dr. Benader, all in favor?
Wait,
Just for taking it.
This is just for taking it off the table. Or, correct, off the table. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, motion carries unanimously. Would someone like to move the second reading and to resolve to adopt and approve the revisions to the following policies that were just lifted from the table? 5660, School Food Services Program, Lunch and Breakfast. 5710, Transportation. 5741, Drug and Alcohol Testing and School Bus Driver and Other Safety-Sensitive Employers. 7222, Diploma and Credential Options for Students with Disabilities. 7320, Alcohol, Tobacco, Drugs, and Other Substances. 7550, Dignity for All Students. And finally, 8470, Home Instruction and Homeschooling. Mrs. Leatherbarrow, thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Beeger, is there any discussion? Yes, Mrs. Leatherbarrow.
I just have one question regarding the transportation policy, which is policy 5710. And looking it over, I don't see anything regarding transporting students during the school day. I do understand that we do that for field trips. I'm looking at paragraph 4. The last line of that paragraph says the board may make available additional transportation services as may be necessary to fulfill clearly identified needs related to the educational goals of the district. Am I correct to interpret that to mean that that would include field trips during the school day?
Correct.
Okay. So what I see from this policy is it doesn't deal with anything regarding parent notice for field trips or anything like that. So I'm wondering if I wanted to address parent notice, would that be in like a different policy, perhaps like a field trip policy?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's my question. Thank you. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is there has been some discussion, and I'll bring it up as a correspondence later, but I believe there was a recent field trip within the district, and parents may not have been aware of it because they were going to, I don't know if they were going to the planetarium or the middle school, I can't recall, but I know that happened, so I do want to talk about that later. Thank you.
Any other discussion on these policies? Mrs. Beeger.
I guess I just want to make a point, because there's so many policies for people in the audience, that these aren't like secret policies. These are all online. So if you were curious and wanted to see they're very lengthy, some of them, but we're required to read through, but they're also posted each month. And then in the district, our website does a wonderful job of having these policies there. So they're there and accessible for everyone in the community as well.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 8-0-0. And now our feature presentation. Would someone like to make a motion to resolve to approve the elimination of class rank for the existing 10th grade class effective September 2017? Mrs. Van Cise, is there a second? Mrs. Vasquez, discussion. Mrs. Beeger.
Well, I want to point out that we have two different motions here. This first motion is for our 10th grade class, and we've had many speakers in the evening tonight, in the audience tonight, speaking to the elimination of class rank, particularly they're discussing for juniors. We've already made this decision as a board to eliminate class rank for our incoming freshmen and below. I want to point this out because I think it's important to note that we really are trying to hear our community and that these seem to be two separate issues. And looking at our 10th grade class, they may not be as vested in the class rank as our juniors who are, so they say, so close to the finish line. So I'm happy to see that we have decided to do this as two different motions.
Thank you. Other discussion? Mrs. Van Cise, please.
So I know I've been a big proponent of this continued discussion, so I actually decided to write things down so that I can be very clear and concise, I guess. But first off, I just really wanted to reiterate and stress clarity that we are not taking back our prior decision to eliminate class rank, that this remains in effect. I felt the necessity as a board member to continue to discuss and seek further information and input, especially from parents, and actually most importantly from our students in both 10th and 11th grades. Secondly, I would just like to point out that how much I appreciate that Dr. Martzloff and the leadership team in creating a very well-developed survey and being very open to continue this discussion at the table. I would also like to thank the parents and the students who took part in the survey and spoke up, expressing their own value or their own values, their views, and their opinions. Lastly, I believe that the district, along with our board, made the right decision in eliminating class rank for the freshman class and thereafter. The facts and data prove that this is in the best interest of our students. We now know how much anxiety this causes and how much stress and the competitiveness it creates amongst classmates, and even potentially becoming a barrier for college admission and even denial of scholarships. So my question is, why would we not want to eliminate class rank for our students, especially at the 10th grade level, even the 11th grade level? I appreciate students coming to the podium to express their desire, because that's why we put this as two separate items, 10th grade and 11th grade. I just would like to know, my big underlying question is still, if we know that this is in the best interest, why would we deny the 10th and 11th grade classes as well?
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Mecca.
So I just want to thank Maggie, Tori, and Nicholas for coming to speak. I think that you guys represented my point of view very well on the topic. While 2/3 of people surveyed want to see the elimination of class rank for the 10th and 11th graders right now, I think the biggest impact is on a smaller, higher achieving percentage of students, the ones that will be at the top, and I don't think it's fair to change the rules of the game in the middle of the game.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I would echo exactly what Mr. Mecca just said. I think the way that we've implemented it already works and works well. It may be a minority of students in terms of numbers that would be negatively affected by enacting this, in the sense that they want to keep class rank. Those are the ones that we've heard from today, but I think the effect it has on them is felt much more because of all the decisions they've made along the way. And I think it's important to respect the hard work that they've put in and the decisions that they've made. So I'm on board with Mr. Mecca's line of thinking.
Any other comments? Please talk to me, Kelly.
I intend to vote differently on the 10th grade than the 11th grade, and my reasoning for voting eventually to keep it for the 11th graders is because it's already March. And I think the time of the year, it's too far into the year to change anything, either pro or con on that decision.
Any other comments? Dr. Van Ader.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. For me, I see the 10th and the 11th grade rationale linked. I think I was probably quoted earlier at a board meeting saying, I think it's unfair to change the rules of the game once the game has begun. I think it affects both 10th graders and 11th graders, in my perception, equally. As we know, even back in as early as middle school, people are selecting coursework and activities, etc., schedules around the concept of class rank. So I'm going to vote keeping those together because I think it's a similar rationale. Thank you.
Any other comments? I will chime in agreement with most of the comments that have already been said. I do agree, in my own opinion, that changing the rules after the game's already started makes it difficult to play the game. And I think as well, a lot of the 8th graders were vetting their schedules, a lot of the sophomores and juniors were vetting their schedules back in 8th grade in anticipation of making these achievements. I think we did the right thing when we made the decision to introduce it in a phased-in approach, starting with this year's incoming year of freshmen. And that is a reversal. If we go back a year ago, I was a proponent right in the front of the line saying let's eliminate it immediately. But I think more so the survey results, which were surprising even to myself, that 1/3 in both sets of classes of students, and that 1/3 in both set of classes from the parents. It's 4 different results that all basically said the same thing, and it was 1/3. And to me, 1/3 is a very large number that has to be considered here when we're discussing class rank. So for the audience, this first motion that we're going to be voting on is basically the elimination of class rank, starting with the current sophomore 10th grade class. And if this motion is approved, then the class rank would be eliminated effective immediately, or I should say effective backwards to September of 2017 when they entered this academic year. If the motion is denied, then it will stay the same as it is right now with the existing freshmen. Then we'll make another vote, another motion and a vote for the junior class. Okay, all in favor for, let me reread the motion here. Making a motion to resolve to approve the elimination of class rank for the existing 10th grade class effective September 2017. All in favor? Okay. All opposed? Motion fails 4 to 5 to 0. Would someone like to make a motion to resolve to approve the elimination of class rank for the existing 11th grade class effective September 2017? Mrs. Beeger, is there a second? Mrs. Van Cise, is there any discussion? Mrs. Beeger, please.
When we made the decision to eliminate class rank, one of the most prevailing comments for me that I was hearing was the opportunities that were denied by students, and one of the reasons for that is just because we're such a high-performing district. There was a parent that spoke to me about her child who graduated from Williamsville East, who had a 96 overall average for college classes, and her rank was 89. And so to me, I thought that's a child who could be in the very top portion in another district, which it's fantastic that we have such high-performing students. So my heart is with that idea of getting rid of class rank. At the same time, our role here on the school board is to really hear our community. And in the last month, actually last couple of months,
there has been a lot of noise in our community about keeping class rank for the 11th grade students. At our community forum, there were a number of parents that came, and their comments had me thinking a little differently about this. And even our students tonight who came, who were so brave and well-spoken in their comments. And while I see the merits of eliminating class rank for our juniors, I think that a lot of the comments we've heard have really helped me, at least, to see that changing this for the juniors would kind of be like changing the rules so close to the finish line. So I appreciate the great amount of input that we've had from both parents and students on this issue.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mrs. Vasquez?
This discussion reminds me of a great philosopher once said, and I don't know who said it, that the history books are written by the winners, the victors. In this case, though, the victors are going to be the 1/3, whereas the victorious should be the 2/3. The people have voiced their concerns regarding class rank, and they have said overwhelmingly that they want it eliminated. And we, as a board, will sit here and decide to give in to the 1/3. I do think that we're doing most of our district a disservice.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Meyer?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly respect that opinion, and I can understand that. But there's also the idea of tyranny by the majority, and it plays itself out in government all the time. And it's equally important to respect the interests and rights of the minority. And in this context, I believe that the minority of students would be disproportionately affected by the elimination of class rank because of all the work they've already put in, and because the system that was in place forced onto them decisions that they had to make with respect to their education.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, once again, this is a motion to resolve to approve the elimination of class rank for the existing 11th grade class effective September 2017. All in favor? All opposed? Motion fails 2-7-0. Class rank will remain the way it is. Dr. Martzloff, can you please present to the board an update and review of the school district security?
Thank you, Mr. LeMay. I'll just wait a moment for the screen to come down. I'd like to invite Chief Askey and Captain McNamara to come to the podium. They're going to be teaming up with us on this presentation, as well as Dr. Sierra, our Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Education and Student Services. And we have a presentation to share with the board and with our community about what we have going on as it relates to school security and what some potential areas are for serious review going forward. So, getting started with our presentation this evening, first of all, this slide really points to the fact that we must do everything we can to maximize the physical and emotional safety of our students. If students don't feel physically and emotionally safe, they can't focus on learning. And so really this is our number one priority as a school district, is for our students to feel not just physically safe, but also emotionally safe. And if we are able to achieve this priority for all of our students, that is absolutely a good thing. So what's been done to enhance school safety? First of all, the board should know that we've installed security cameras, a total of 276 of them throughout the district, our 13 schools. We did that in August of 2013. And what we added into this is the Amherst Police Department has real-time access to the cameras. They don't, I believe, sit at headquarters and watch the goings-on in our schools, but what it does do is allows them to pull up access if there was ever a real emergency going on, to see what's happening in our hallways and within our schools. We also installed a buzzer system with camera and intercom at every main entrance and added visitor protocol in 2013. We established building safety teams with regularly scheduled meetings and drills. These could include tabletop exercises and other drills, which we'll talk about a little later in the presentation. We also established a locked classroom and office door protocol and improved security locking mechanisms on classroom doors. This one's really critical in that we're not asking teachers to keep their classroom doors closed and locked. Obviously, we want people to be able to move freely in and out of a classroom, but if they are going to keep their door propped open, for example, it'd be set to lock, because if there ever was an intruder or an emergency, you need to be able to close the door and know that it's locked and is a barrier to someone looking to do harm from getting into your classroom. We also have been numbering classroom windows and doors. You may have noticed some of those numbers across our schools, windows and doors, to assist first responders, and we'll be doing more of that on the interior of our schools for our classrooms coming up soon. What else have we done? We added an ID swipe card access system for all employees in 2013. This is something that was critical in terms of who has access to our buildings at various times during the day. And along with this, we increased the number of the proximity card access points to the building entrances. There are now 92 in total. And we do that so that, for example, teachers can take students outside for recess, or students can go outside during physical education, or whatever the case may be, so that people can come and go, but the doors are locked and do not need to be propped while people are outside. We have annual safety training for all of our employees. We have established a district safety planning committee with quarterly meetings led by Erie One BOCES Risk Management. And we have ongoing monitoring, of course, of the local, state, and national dialogue regarding school safety. So I'm going to turn it over now to Chief Askey, and Captain McNamara is going to talk about our strong partnership with the Amherst Police Department.
Thanks, Superintendent. I appreciate it. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chief John Askey of the Amherst Police Department. I've been with Chief for a little over 10 years now, and I've met most of you, and certainly have a long-standing relationships with our administrators, our teachers, and staff in the Williamsville District, and we're proud of that fact also. I brought with me Captain Jim McNamara. Jim is our day shift captain and oversees all of our patrol division programs related to the schools. Our SLO program, School Liaison Officer program. He coordinates the safety drills. He is also our tactical commander of our emergency response team. So Jim is our primary emergency response manager for any incidents that's happened in the town. He's also an instructor at the Homeland Security Facility in Oriskany. I consider him an expert on school safety and on emergency response. So Jim's here to answer any questions that you might have more on the tactics side of things. As I get older, I know less and less about the tactics and rely on people like Jim. So the relationship with the schools. There are 13 public school buildings in the Williamsville School District. We have 3 districts in the town of Amherst, Sweet Home and Amherst. So the challenge for the police department is tremendous. That's just our public schools. We have a number of privates in the town also. So the challenge to us is tremendous. And what helps make us successful, I think the most important point, is the relationships that you build. The communication that happens. We're sorry to hear Anna's retiring. I can think of no one we've had a better relationship over most of my career, certainly in administration, than with Anna. I know my detective lieutenant in charge of investigations relating to the schools on the phone or texting Anna on a daily basis, all day long, all night long, depending on what's happening in and around our schools. So the communication is critical. Building relationships with the kids from the time they first come to school till the time they graduate and move on and become community members. I can't stress how important it is to have positive, productive relationships with our community and with our schools. So that's where it starts. Some of the specific things we do once we've within those relationships is we're having a meeting this April. It was planned prior to the school shooting in Florida. We get together with all of our superintendents and administrators at headquarters to discuss issues that affect all of us, and that helps enhance the communication, and that's upcoming in this April. Captain McNamara will be running that. We have a school liaison officer program. Sometimes it gets confusing. There's student resource officers, there's school liaison officers, and what are these positions exactly? What we have in Williamsville is a school liaison officer program. So officers A number of years ago, after other tragic events in our country, we put this program together. Officers receive, we have approximately 25 officers that are part of this program, overseen by Captain McNamara and at least one patrol lieutenant. And as part of their normal duties, they stop into our schools. Anytime they have free time, they stop in, and they have certain assigned times that they're there also. They'll stop in and talk to the principal. They'll ask them what concerns they may have or what's going on today, whatever it might be, just to build those relationships. They'll provide training or teaching at the request of the administration, the principal, or any staff members. They'll walk the grounds of the school to make sure that the protocols that the school has established are being handled, meaning they'll check the doors, they'll make sure that somebody checked and had them sign in when they come into the building. Every time I come into the school buildings, and I'm there a lot, I sign in and make sure I introduce myself, whether I'm in plain clothes or uniform, and we want to make sure those protocols are being followed. So our work as a team in that regard. The school liaison officers receive training from administrators throughout the town of Amherst, school administrators, as to what the relationship should look like between the police department and officers, so that we are in your buildings or on your grounds, but that we respect the protocols of the school and understand what the mission of the school is with our students, so that we don't come as an occupying force. We're here working along with the school and building positive relationships. So the officers are in and around your schools on a regular basis, anytime, all the time. They conduct at least 4 drills a year by state mandate, the lockdown, lockout drills, so they're in the schools to help conduct those drills and work along with your staff to see that the protocols are being followed. So they do an awful lot in the schools. We collaborate in conducting drills, including large-scale, realistic as we can make them, drills throughout our town. So we have, I mentioned the challenge of the police department and how many school buildings we have. We don't always hold it within the Williamsville district. We certainly have in the past, but wherever we hold it, Amherst, Sweet Home, or Williamsville, we all get together. So the superintendents are talking, the administrators are talking, the principals are invited, so that we can see what one of these major drills looks like and how we can coordinate the efforts of EMS, the police, fire, the schools. We can work out of a command center to help coordinate our efforts to help manage incidents if they unfortunately happen. So we do those on an annual basis, or certainly every other year, and Captain McNamara manages those. We have an after-hours school security program in Williamsville. Williamsville is hired for the hours when most of the administrators have gone home, when the staff isn't all in attendance, helping manage the school and coordinate safety. These officers are on campus to help protect the school when, I don't want to say our guard's down, but we have less of a staff to help protect the schools. So they're there to help make sure that when people come to the school for after-school events, dances, sports, whatever it might be, and they're participating in activities after school, we have proper security at the school. So those are armed, uniformed Amherst police officers that are present at major events in the school. They're certainly at all the dances, they're at the homecomings and things of that nature, just to be a presence to help prevent things from going wrong and to give the kids a feeling of safety in and around the school. We've been doing that my entire career. That's not something new, and I think it's very valuable. We have ongoing two-way communication. That's what it's all about. I spoke about relationships, but the communication at the patrol level with the teachers and the kids, and certainly with the administration is just unparalleled, I believe. It's a tremendous relationship we've enjoyed for a long time, and I think it helps us a great deal. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
I'm going to speak a little bit about your safety plans. Safety plans have been in place since early 2000, since SAVE legislation requires it. It hasn't changed for you folks at all. It's still lockout, lockdown, evacuate, shelter in place. But the national dialogue, every time we have one of these national incidents, you'll hear alert, avoid, deny, contact, run, hide, fight. So I just want to clarify that a little bit. You are still in a school environment where a lockdown procedure is industry standard. That is what is the go-to move, if you will, for your school staff. And the reason is because if we look at these incidents nationwide, they last 3 to 5 minutes long. And as soon as law enforcement is on location, they are over within seconds. And your Amherst police response time to a priority 1 call like this is less than 3 minutes. So we need this incident to be contained for 3 minutes. That's what we're looking at the most. And the best way that you can secure your kids is to lock them down in those schools, in the rooms, in the hard structures to protect them. We talk about staying out of the room, sight of the windows, moving along the strong wall, if you will, the wall where the door is. and remaining quiet and communicating by cell phone if you can for accountability purposes. If you don't have the availability to run down to lock down because you're out in the ball field or you're in the gymnasium and that you're not afforded the opportunity, then we do suggest running. And where do you run to? You run to a place where you can lock down. That's where you try to get to a fortified situation where you can lock the door and protect yourself again for those 2 to 3 minutes while we get on location. And if that isn't possible, then we encourage you to run into the neighborhoods, and we'll find you later. And then last but least, if you are unfortunately put in a situation where you have to fight, we suggest that you fight for your life. You have the right to do so, and use whatever is available to you at that time to protect yourselves.
Scott, you would.
So at this time, I ask Dr. Sierra to share some thoughts on emotional safety within the Williamsville Central School District. Dr. Sierra?
Thank you, Dr. Martzloff. If I could just digress for one moment and thank the Amherst Police Department. As mentioned earlier, we do have a very strong relationship, and they are exceptionally responsive. It doesn't matter what time, day or night or weekend, that I place a call, I'm immediately responded to, and I can't thank them enough for that partnership. So I thank you for giving me that moment to digress, and I will now return to the presentation. But so a couple things we wanted to share with you. Many of these you're all familiar with. We do have an established threat assessment protocol in the district, and I don't know, Dr. Martzloff, if you wanted to speak to the materials in front of board members.
Yes, I just wanted to share, if that's okay. I bought the Board a present. It's a book, and the book was published in May of 2002 by the United States Secret Service and the United States Education Department on threat assessment in schools. It is really the go-to guide for what it is to be on the lookout for when it comes to potential school shooters. It's not about, for example, if a person makes a threat. It's about if a person poses a threat. Those are two very different things, and we rely on our partnership with the Amherst Police Department to figure that out. We have to oftentimes go and visit students in the home, make sure there's no access to weapons, for example. Those are things that we have to do from time to time, and we're very fortunate to have their quick collaboration and cooperation to make that happen. So some of you may ask, what is it that we can do to prevent these things? I would strongly encourage board members to read this book. It's a fairly quick, easy read. At the same time, it provides information based on real school shootings up until 2002 that were talked about by the U.S. Secret Service and determined what it was to really be on the lookout for. So the research, if you will, has kind of been done for us. We just need to make sure we pay close attention to it and focus our areas of improvement on the right places. So thank you, Dr. Siri. Please continue.
Thank you, Dr. Martzloff. So in reference to what Dr. Martzloff just spoke about, there were 10 key findings, one of which, the very first finding with the report that you have in front of you, is that there was no clear profile. And so I would encourage you to take a peek at the material before you. It has formed the foundation for our threat assessment protocol in the district. So we do have an established threat assessment protocol. And what we really look at with that threat assessment protocol with the multidisciplinary team is factual information. We're looking at behavior, we're looking at communications, we're looking at situations and current experiences for the student, and it's really to help guide what interventions and supports and next steps we need to take. And sometimes those next steps do indeed involve contact with the Amherst Police Department, our mental health staff, supporting, making triage or referrals, etc. It's really determined by the specific circumstances of the case for that individual. So having said that, we also, as you can see from the PowerPoint, we do have contacts and connections and referrals to community resources. Just a few things to mention. If we do believe a student is at risk of harming self or others, we do have resources that we can connect with. So we may, for example, reach out to the CARES team and ask for their assistance or evaluation on site. We do have relationships with other agencies, crisis services, etc. We do have relationships with primary care providers, several of whom have behavioral health specialists on staff.
If a child is working with a private practitioner, common practice for us would be to ask for parental consent so that we could collaborate with the private practitioner. In addition, ongoing professional development. You have all seen our professional development program here. We've talked in the past about focus on social emotional learning, about mindfulness practices. We have provided a host of different types of staff development to our faculty and staff. We have covered responding to anxiety. We've done quite a bit on suicide prevention, did a Safe Talk training, bipolar disorder. Again, I can keep going on and on, but we try to address the needs of our students as best we can. Substance abuse prevention. We've done some sessions on LGBTQ, inclusive schools, safe zones training, again, all with the goal of connections, fostering relationships in our community. And I'm talking about our entire school community, so that kids feel connected to one another, they feel supported, they feel they have trusted adults they can go to, that they have resources. Should they need anything, they have resources to tap into. Let me just see where I am here. Wellness report, asset development. You've heard us speak time and time again about asset development and the importance of students having developmental assets. And there are 40 developmental assets, 20 internal, 20 external, and we're working continuously to develop those assets in our students. I've mentioned in the past that any incremental growth is important. So while it may seem frustrating to others when you take a look at the search survey results, for example, and see a half a point growth in the total number of assets, that's significant, making that type of growth. We know from the research that the greater number of assets a student has, the less likely they are to engage in risk-taking behaviors, the more thriving indicators that they will have available to them, the more resilient they will be. So that is constantly our work, and that's why the wellness report is so important. All of the people in our school communities that are involved in helping build assets. We'll share with you, somebody mentioned to me today the important relationship a student has with one of our custodians. Everyone in our buildings can build assets, can form relationships with students, and that is a consistent, redundant message we all have to take responsibility to communicate. So I would encourage people to take a look at the asset report on the website. We're looking at building positive school communities, cultures, climates that feature safe environments free from violence, bullying, harassment, substance use, supportive academic settings, clear and fair discipline policies. So one of the things we're currently engaged in, as the board is familiar, we're looking at restorative practices. We have a work group that's established. We have a disproportionality work group. We also are doing a pilot of safe and civil schools in 2 of our middle schools and engaged in that training right now. So we know as a community that a positive school climate helps boost student achievement, it increases graduation rates, it increases teacher satisfaction and decreases turnover, enhances safety, it reduces disciplinary concerns. So all the things we talk about, to establish a positive school climate, that's the work that we need to engage in each and every day. Implementation of web and link crew, I won't spend a lot of time on. We've presented multiple times on web and link, but they are really critical transition programs for our students, transitioning from 4th to 5th grade and transitioning from 8th to the high school. And we've received so much positive feedback and with regard to the impact for our students of those programs. Implementation of mindfulness with a focus on social and emotional learning. Again, I will not take a lot of the board's time or the community's time. We've presented on both of these topics as well. But those 5 core competencies are what we're trying to constantly build in our students. Self-awareness, social awareness, responsible decision-making, self-management, relationship skills, those key 5 core social and emotional learning competencies. Suicide assessment protocol, training for our mental health staff. We also have an assessment protocol that our folks are trained in and that we use when we need to. We have sources of strength implemented at all 3 high schools, and we are engaged in a discussion right now as to whether or not to also contemplate implementation at the middle school level. And then our character education program in the district, it's infused throughout our curriculum. Our shared decision-making teams discuss wellness and asset development and character education, and so we try to make sure we address that across the board. And I'd also like to make mention of our mental health staff. We have an exceptional mental health staff in our district. They're very busy, but they're very committed to the students in our district. And I just wanted to take a moment to applaud their efforts and thank them.
So some items for next steps for consideration, based, number one, on the research, based on some things we've reviewed over the years here in Williamsville. Would it make sense to consider an SRO program for all of our schools? And I think if we asked Chief Askey and Captain McNamara that tonight, they'd say, we don't have enough police officers available to be SROs in all of Williamsville schools. But the point is, we need to be having the conversation about, do we need an increased presence? Perhaps an SRO for the whole district is a starting point. Or do we need to have more random checks? Or do we need to have more hours of the Amherst security professionals at different points of the day that are critical for student support and safety? That's just a talking point, really. In addition, additional cameras for our schools. Certainly these can be used for safety and also for deterrence of negative behavior that may occur in our schools. We want to enhance our physical safety, and our plan really is to look at that through upcoming capital projects. These can include the doors, our walls, our windows, etc. There's a lot of things. And Captain McNamara mentioned in 3 to 5 minutes, a school shooting is generally over with. So if you can have a locked door or a window that doesn't shatter and fall apart, or whatever the item might be that slows a school shooter down, countless lives can be saved because the person ends up having to move more slowly. So that's part of the intention there. We also want to look at enhanced emotional supports. It doesn't necessarily mean automatically adding more school counselors, social workers, school psychologists, folks in those different roles, but it does mean, for example, connecting students to a meaningful adult-led activity. If you look at some of the research, all school shooters have something in common besides access to a gun, is none of them were connected to a meaningful adult-led activity in school. And you think about that for a moment, and number one, it makes sense, but number two, it's sad, because any student that comes to our schools should be connected to a meaningful activity for themselves, whether it's an extracurricular, whether it's something in the music or arts, whether it's athletics, whatever it might be that connects them to school. We may want to consider a district-wide security audit to have some outside professionals or folks from the Amherst Police Department or whoever it might be come in, look at all of our schools, do a report on what areas should we focus on first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc., to increase our school security. And then, of course, we're always looking to add additional professional development. School security is always on our minds. It's something we're always discussing, but it also becomes like aspirin in the medicine cabinet. If nothing happens or there's no tragedies or things of that nature, within 6 months to a year, all of a sudden it's just not quite as strong, hasn't been perhaps re-reviewed again. We need to constantly thrust it into the spotlight, if you will, for all of our administrators, our teachers, our staff members, so that we are the best we can be when it comes to securing our students. So back in 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut, our president at the time, President Barack Obama, said, "These tragedies must end, and to end them we must change. We will be told that the causes of such violence are complex, and it is true. No single law, no set of laws can eliminate evil from the world or prevent every senseless act of violence in our society. But that can't be an excuse for inaction. Surely we can do better than this." And this was after, of course, Sandy Hook, which what a horrible tragedy when 6 and 7-year-old kids are murdered. And that was 5 years ago. And here we are 5 years later with another horrific school tragedy, and we're talking about this topic again, what we can do to make things even more secure and safe for our students and our staff. So this sort of concludes our presentation. I want to thank Dr. Sierri, Chief Askey, Captain McNamara, and we'll certainly take any questions from members of the board at this time.
Mr. Meyer?
Yeah, has the Amherst Police Department done a school-by-school security review? I mean, each school is different. You look at our 3 high schools, for instance. One of the things you talk about is slowing a shooter down, and I think the different high schools present very different problems. You look at East, while Williamsville East is totally open. That becomes a real challenge. So have you looked at the schools and come up with different strategies, plans, or ideas that can be implemented?
Absolutely, we have. When the SAVE legislation first came out, it required schools to have safety plans and to implement drills and things of that nature. We sat down with Williamsville at the time and helped put that plan together for all of the schools, all of your buildings. And we haven't had an audit of that system, all the schools in a formal sense. But as I said, in our SLO program, we've assigned specific officers to be assigned to the school building. So it's not somebody different every single time they're at the schools. So they bring that feedback to us because the schools do change. The construction changes, there's capital improvements, there's changes in our society and our staff, just to get to know different people. So we lend that SLO program that the officers are, as I mentioned, there's a great number of things that they do, but part of what they do is to become familiar with that school, to bring the information back to us at headquarters about the structural changes. They certainly give us those, new safety plans or new school building plans on a regular basis. Those plans are available in all of our police cars, so the officers can pull it up live on their computers to know what changes have happened to the buildings. And our officers are bringing that information back to us on a regular, ongoing basis.
And if the Board of Education wanted a formal review, a formal audit of each school, is that something that our police department can do?
We certainly could. There's standards out there that everybody can access, and we could assist or audit the schools. We'd be happy to. So yes, we could provide that.
Mrs. Beeger?
First and foremost, thank you. Thank you for coming and presenting into our district, for sharing. I think a lot of people have been asking a great deal of questions regarding safety and what's the plan and that kind of thing. I feel better after hearing this and knowing about not just the number of cameras we have, but hearing about the relationship between our district and the Amherst Police Department is very comforting to me as your trained professionals in security and keeping people safe. So thank you for all you do in our district with that partnership as well. I think that's such an important component. When I'm looking at next steps for consideration, one thing that I would like to mention to our district as well is something that I've been hearing from parents, and that's perhaps ways that we can think of strengthening communication in a number of different levels. We communicate to parents sometimes at a district level. If there's an incident, sometimes if we communicate through WITS, that email may not get to parents in a timely manner, so maybe looking at if there's a delay, if it's a tech glitch, having a couple of different methods of communicating to parents. I know we do that. We have a great way of communicating if there's a snow day, because that's a district thing, which is important. I don't know if we have that capacity as far as just buildings, and so I'm wondering if that's something we can look at to make sure that if there's a building incident that can be communicated. That was something that came up at a PTA meeting recently, and also just ensuring that communication, if there's an emergency within a building, that there's good systems in place that are constantly updated with from the administration to the staff to ensure that our students are as safe as possible. Hearing about these different committees that are in place, I'm sure that these kinds of things are being talked about all the time. And there was one committee that you mentioned, and I was curious when you said that there were different stakeholders, who is on that? Of course, now I can't find it. Oh, the District Safety Planning Committee. Is that just administrators, teachers? Are there police officers on that committee?
That committee has a representative from every school. Normally, it is a teacher who is on that committee, but there are several principals who are on that committee responsible for their school's participation.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Real quick, if I can, just to clarify, Mary, were we talking about the Erie One BOCES committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me ask a question to clarify on that too. So it's just one person from each building?
Yes.
Okay, is there any, I'm assuming somebody from district as well?
I'm on it. Dr. Sierra is on it. Keith Langlotz, Director of Facilities, is on it. So central administration is very well represented.
Okay, thanks. Other comments? Dr. McClary?
I just want to go back to what Mr. Meyer had said and to ask what the protocol or process is to request that we do an updated security audit. Is that something that's a motion or just a request of district or?
No, that's certainly something we can work with the officials from the Amherst Police Department on. We wouldn't require a motion for that.
All right. Thank you.
Mrs. Leatherbarrow.
I have a question about cameras. I'm not sure, Dr. Martloff, if this should go to you. That was mentioned as one of the pieces to consider. Can you talk to us a little bit about how cameras are used right now? And I'm also curious if there's monitors in the office available. In the school where I worked, for example, there were 3 monitors and you could see like maybe 5 or 6 different rooms on each monitor or areas of the building, not actual classroom inside. And if that's the case, or if the monitors are, or if the cameras are just used to go back and view after there's an incident.
Sure, we have access with a screen in all of our main offices. It obviously doesn't cover all the cameras in a particular school, but it does provide some views, for example, of the main front door and other key spots that have been determined by the school principal in conjunction with the facilities department. But most of our cameras end up, number one, being a deterrent, as I mentioned earlier, and number two, being a great investigative tool. Once something takes place, something happens in a bathroom or something happens in one of our hallways, it makes it easier to track what took place and to be able to follow up with discipline for the students. I wouldn't mention cameras as a great thing that would help with targeted school violence, but it certainly helps with the overall school culture and helps to promote accountability among students in a school for some of your more run-of-the-mill items that may take place.
Okay.
Mr. Mecca?
Dr. Sierra, thank you for the being part of the presentation, and also congratulations. Chief Askey, thank you for the presentation tonight. And sorry, I've got to look.
McNamara.
McNamara, thank you also. I just want to echo what I've heard everybody say. I'm pleased to hear of the strong relationship between the Amherst Police Department and our school district, and it is reassuring to me as a board member that safety and security is top of mind, and I have full confidence that we will work together, our administration and the Amherst Police Department, as well as we've been in the past, to ensure our security and safety. So thank you for that. I also do want to say I put a plug in for Maple West meeting, and I realized that I didn't mention the time. It's at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, and there's going to be a parent forum on community safety if anyone's interested in attending. And I realized because Dr. McClary asked me what time that was at, so I hadn't mentioned that previously. But thank you for the great presentation. I don't really have a question, just accolades.
Thank you. Other questions? Mrs. Van Cise, please.
Thank you very much to everyone that was involved in this presentation, because of course it's a topic that is of heightened concern, of course. I know that the PTSA Council has asked all PTA parties at their designated schools to get input from parents in regards to what they believe. So we will be receiving that report as a board. One thing that was brought up is that you could have all the money in the world, $1 million, and it's still totally never going to prevent or dismiss the risk of this happening. The big key is educating everyone, the teachers, the students, the parents. So I'm glad to hear of all these different plans that are in place. And especially a huge component of this, and it's great to hear about the cameras and to look more into what can we do with the security end of it, but also really targeting, I think the key component is mental health, and continuing with those mental health, acknowledging it, and what practices can we put in place to help our struggling students. Just wondering, and I know the district met, of course, with the Amherst PD, were there any measures put in place within the past week or two, or just even reminders, anything that changed with, and maybe in regards to additional doors being locked, or anything with protocol, or, again, reminders of we have to lock our doors, this is what we expect from students, from teachers, just to make sure that we still have everything in place like we did 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think we're always reminding people, again, because if you don't remind people, they forget, or they perhaps don't think about it. It doesn't become part of sort of the internal way they think about things and do things. So we're always making those reminders. In terms of any specific changes, I wouldn't really point to anything that we've specifically changed. We've tried to keep all our exterior doors locked at all times and have one door that people come into once the school day gets underway. So for example, many of our schools were built with the idea that people need to escape if there's a fire. And at North High School alone, we have 38 different exterior doors. That's an incredible amount to keep track of, and district-wide we have 280 exterior doors on our schools. So those are things we're always having to make sure, please don't prop doors, make sure they're locked, make sure they're secure. Again, it's that barrier that's going to help protect people in case of an emergency. So those sorts of reminders happen, but no specific actual changes.
Scott, I could mention from the police department's perspective,
Yep.
when there's these major incidents across the country, our first concern is of a copycat and something happening to our community. Certainly our guard's up all of the time, but when something like that happens, we do put additional things in place along with the district. We instruct all of our SLOs, our school liaison officers, to double their efforts and to be at the schools at the start of the day when the kids they're vulnerable all day, but they're most vulnerable when they're getting off the bus, coming into the school, not under the direct supervision of a teacher yet, or when they're being released at the end of the day. So we have cars in and around the schools at those times, then throughout the day, so an increased effort. For instance, tomorrow we're going to be with the Walkout. We're concerned about our kids' safety too, your kids' safety, and we've coordinated where we'll be in and around, those SLOs will be in and around those schools just to make sure the kids are safe from the traditional dangers in the cars in the parking lots, or cars on the street, or outsiders paying attention to what's going on in the school. So we're going to have extra resources out there for that. We've gotten together with our entire staff. Every single officer's been through in-service training, and this has been the primary topic that we've been talking about, reviewing what's been happening down in Florida, what the specifics were that occurred in that incident, and what's happening across the country, because the tactics to some extent do change. The way the school shooters approach or how they got to where they ended up can change, and we want to learn everything we can, so we've communicated that to all of our officers, and the SLOs are sharing that information with the schools. I'll give you one example when we talk about tactics. If you remember in Virginia Tech, the individuals started locking the doors so they had more time to do damage to the kids in the college. It was a college atmosphere. After that, the Amherst Police Department bought breaching tools for all of our cars. Every one of our cars have rams, cutting tools, so that we don't have to wait for the SWAT team to come. The patrol officers on location can get into those schools. They have shields, and they're going to get in there and they're going to move from the patrol division standpoint. So we take a look at every single incident. Captain McNamara is a specialist in that area, and we try to adapt and share that information as we go along. On the investigative end, it hasn't been talked about tonight. I'll keep it short, but that's where Anna spends a great deal of time with the police department. We're certainly there, visible, our patrol division, for security purposes, to build relationships, but our investigators are the individuals that, if we get information from anyone, staff, kids, citizens, about something that happened in the school, a threat to the school, or somebody talking about something very unusual or something inappropriate, we're going to assign the officer to take a report. We're going to assign detectives immediately to that case if it involves our schools. And what they do is they gather the facts, but if there's any mention of deadly force or deadly weapons, they're going to that home. So we communicate to those parents firsthand that their kid made this statement or their child, that there's some indication that there's something not right, so that we can find out about what's happening in that home. What is the child's mental health status? We're not experts, but we can certainly identify certain characteristics that may be of concern so that we can refer them in the right direction on the mental health side. And if they've been, we get them to sign onto their computers, and we check to make sure that if there's information on those computers or social networking issues where they're sharing information about school shootings or school violence, it's just more keys that we can look into. We don't charge in there. We go and I can't remember the last time we didn't get cooperation from good parents in the town. They are concerned. They don't want to have their child involved in something this horrific, and we get great cooperation, believe it or not, when we stop there and we ask for their help. We make sure there's no weapons in the house. We search that house with their permission to make sure there's no weapons. We check those computers, and then we have social networking experts within the PD that have received specialized training so that they'll check the internet to see if there's other indicators in the social networking community or communications that would indicate there are risk factors. I'm sharing some information. I don't know if you hear that every day or you realize what happens when we are tagged or get that information about something, not minor things, but something of somebody said, hey, I'm thinking about shooting up a school, or somebody is good enough to tell us that they overheard something of that nature. And we use all due discretion. You won't hear about most of it, but that's what we do when we get that call. And then we close that loop and connect, certainly with the administrators, but 9 times out of 10 with Anna directly at any time of the day or night with our findings. Thank you.
The other piece I would like to just add to that is we shouldn't forget the importance of the ongoing drills, because we learn something from every single one of those drills that we do in partnership with the Amherst Police Department. And while they may seem possibly minor to some, those are significant and really important for us to continue to do.
Mr. Meyer.
Captain, in that scenario that you just went over, you have a person who's making threats. You go over to the house and speak to them. Do you, at any point in time, confiscate weapons? Do you have the ability to confiscate weapons? Have you done it in the past?
All the time. Yeah, generally, we certainly, if the weapon is indicated as a tool to hurt somebody, then we have the legal authority with an arrest or such to seize the weapon, and we do that. Oftentimes, we don't have a charge in place, a criminal charge in place, and then we look for consent or for the parent to turn the weapon over. And to this date, we have had no issues getting them to agree. We take it for safekeeping. We keep it. We store it at our place. Everybody agrees. And then upon the child or the individual receiving the services that they need, they can regain that weapon back if it's truly legally obtained.
Are there any other circumstances under which you're able to confiscate weapons?
Any other? Well, we would need a crime in place, or we would need some sort of legal authority to seize the weapon. And without a crime in place or some threat to use it, and if the person legally owned the weapon and they put their foot down and said that they weren't going to allow us to take it, it would really require, it would be the specific fact patterns would come into play there. We might at that point in time seize that weapon and let them obtain an attorney and defend their right to hold the weapon. It would be a judgment call.
I'd add one more thing, Jim. One thing that comes up where we're doing it probably more than in criminal cases is when we're if somebody is in imminent danger to the life and safety of themselves or others, we work with crisis services. We also have a CIT team, a crisis intervention team at the PD, where officers are specially trained to understand and deal with people with mental illness. So statistics will say, I'm not just talking about schools now, but when we're dealing with individuals in confrontational settings, the majority of them have some type of mental illness. So we've adapted as a police department to train our officers and work in conjunction with crisis services. We would call them. We would, if we can, they're truly an imminent threat, we do a 941, we call it, where they're taken involuntarily to ECMC. Crisis Services has other avenues that they can pursue to convince someone to go get help, or they have additional powers to take them into custody. So we exercise both of those because mental illness is such a large part of it. If somebody's taken, if we believe they're a threat to themselves or others, and we have that legal standing under that 941 of the mental health law, we take the weapons, and we do that all the time. We got a building full of weapons that we're holding for people that have been taken in for mental health checkups. Answer the question, sir?
It did, yeah,
Okay.
thank you, appreciate it.
Other comments? Dr. McClary?
Many people know that I express my respect and support for our Amherst Police Department any opportunity that I can. So I would, again, like to thank you for the presentation and for all of the work that you do for all of us here in Amherst.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. McClary, if you don't know, worked for the town for a period of time with us, and we were on the phone for similar issues with the town, and very familiar with our processes and how we go about trying to solve problems. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Other comments and questions? Great, I can get mine in now. I have a few that I've jotted down here. Chief Askey, Captain McNamara, I thank you immensely for coming tonight and giving us this presentation. Dr. Sierra, thank you again for putting it together, as well as you, Dr. Martzloff. The community has lots of questions, and I think this is a start to answering some of those, so I appreciate it. I have several notes that I want to drill around, and they're kind of random as I've been listening to other people's comments. So I'm going to try and direct them. I'm going to start with drills. I'm going to pose this question both to the Amherst Police Department and to the district. I know there's some lack of communication, especially in the sense of parents, where they're confused from listening to what their students are telling them, the types of drills that they're doing, what's conducting in these drills, and what they're supposed to do. Some parents are coming back and saying that, my son or daughter's being told to hide. Others are being told, just go in the corner and be quiet. Some are not even told to be quiet. Is there some kind of standardization as to what these drills are? Is that something we can share with parents so that they potentially could reiterate it with their students at home to make sure that the students understand the information as it's being presented? That's part one for the district. Part two of that same question for the district is, can you better explain to us, please, what these 4 drills are that are required by the state and how they're conducted? And then the question to flip still with drills back to the Amherst Police. What kind of drills do you folks do? And I know you're doing drills with the school district and stuff like that, but without breaking any confidentiality or anything like that, if you could elaborate on some of what you're doing to help try and plan for an incident like this.
A lot of questions.
Yeah, and I've got more.
Fantastic.
I was still on the first one about, I think when it comes to standards for drills, we have established those standards. We've put together quick fact sheets for our teachers and staff members to be able to utilize. It might not necessarily mean that every person doesn't do it exactly the same. Sometimes people put their own spin on it and do it a little bit differently in different schools and different grade levels and things like that. Dr. Siri, would you like to add anything to that? Not to put you on the spot, but.
Sure, I can just add a couple of things. One is when Dr. Martzloff referred to the annual safety training, that those different safety responses are included in the safety training that Captain McNamara referred to. In addition to that, several years ago, Mrs. Wolf and Amy Volwinkle and I were able to put together an informational pamphlet for parents that we distributed, and I can't remember how far back that was. It was quite a few years ago, and that might be something that it's time to do again, and it explains the different response measures.
So from the policing perspective, there certainly are standards. There's national standards, and then there's New York State standards. They're exactly similar. Jim teaches at the state level so that we're all on the same page throughout New York State on tactics, on what we're teaching our schools. Where I can tell you where things sometimes go astray is that someone will have received information at home from a parent as to what they do in their workplace, or they do in their a different environment other than the schools. So there's a lot of information out there, sometimes misinformation, but certainly on the police department perspective, we are consistent with the state of New York and the national standards. What we're doing What was the second part of the question? I'll let Jimmy talk about exactly what those standards are.
What sort of drills you guys are doing?
What sort of drills we're doing? We just completed certain active shooter training with the entire department. We do that at least once a year, or we'll take an old school or a business is offered up to us, and we'll put the entire department through this realistic simulated training, meaning they're using force on force, but not using real bullets, but they're using a thing called simulation so that they really get the idea what it's like to be under fire and under pressure. So that's what our officers do on the tactical end of things as far as training goes. But there's also, we have in our in-service training, Captain McNamara and others, including myself, will go over incidents that have happened throughout the country from the time these first started happening. And we'll watch them on a big screen together and talk about what we believe went right, what we believe went wrong, from everything from prevention to how we can help prevent these from happening in the first place and building the relationships with our kids and programs like you folks have. What can we do better to connect the kids with their community and with their school, all the way through how do we resolve this once it's unfortunately happened. So we're doing training on the planning side and the preparation side, and then we're certainly doing it on the tactical side, and I'll let Jim talk about that.
Specifically, the schools are required to have 4 lockdown drills a year. You have anywhere from 2 to 5 officers at every one of those drills. It's rare that we can't get an officer there. Those drills maybe look different from building to building. As you said, sir, Williamsville East is much different than Williamsville North. So if a student comes back to a parent and says, well, we did something different, it's largely because their facility is different or where they were in the structure when the drill took place. For instance, when we first started doing these drills several years ago, it was very convenient to have the drill at 8:10 during homeroom, right, when everybody was tucked away neatly in their rooms. Well, now we do them during lunch or when the kids are out on the ball diamond. So it changes, and your teachers, unfortunately, have to be thinking individuals under high stress situations. So they have to make some decisions there. So in Williamsville East, for instance, there's very few places to lock down. I was part of this initial security audit when we created their safety plan. They locked down floor by floor, which is actually an advantage to some degree, depending on exactly where the floor is, the shooter may or may not be. So that's one reason why it may differ from student or parent to parent. And the other is the national dialogue. As I said earlier, everybody's selling their wares. There's ALICE, there's avoid, deny, contact, there's run, hide, fight, there's lockdown, evacuate, and they're all valid techniques for valid situations. And it's which situation do you happen to be in at that particular time. But industry standard says for schools, if you have the ability to lock down, you should lock down.
Next question is for more the district here. I love the idea, Dr. Marceloff, the enhanced emotional supports, connecting students to meaningful adult-led activity. I think that's absolutely amazing. But as Dr. Sierra even mentioned, our social workers are very busy, I believe is the words used. And I've spoken with a handful of them over the last several months. Granted, not a few of them since this shooting, but I've tried to get a gauge from them as to how busy they are over the last, 4 or 5, 6 months we've been doing school visits. And the one thing that I do hear from all of them is that they are absolutely swamped. It's the underlying definition I think I'm always hearing. They're literally going from case to case to case to case. I know when Mr. Schubert sat on this board, he used to tell us he used to talk to us about doubling our social staff, our counselors and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily advocating that we do that, but are we considering it? Is it something that we're looking at the cost benefit and see if we can find? Unfortunately, I don't see the needs of our social workers lightening up anytime soon. I see that workload continuing to get more and more heavy and backloaded. And sadly, our current state of insurance systems don't cover a lot of counselors or social workers for people outside of the schools, and our unfortunately children are coming to school with a lot of needs that didn't occur, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago. So what are we looking at on that? And on that same idea too, have we put any thought process? I love the web crew and the link crew. These are excellent programs, and I think they do an amazing job. Have we looked into any programs maybe at the elementary school level that might do something similar? And I know these programs are specifically designed to help children do transition, but if we looked at programs to help, further friendships and stuff like that, because I think one of the major characteristics we've noticed in these school shootings is people with a lack of friends, lack of people they can talk to, and that's not something that I think we can necessarily fix at the high school level, but it's certainly something that we could start with, making sure that, we're educating and teaching everybody is accepted and trying to go out of our way at that level. So I'll let you answer those, and then I have one last question.
In terms of the number of mental health staff we have in our schools, it's something we'd always like to increase. I don't know if you could increase it enough where people wouldn't feel swamped and busy, unfortunately. About 18 months ago, there was a survey of New York State school superintendents who said their mental health concerns for students has really gone through the roof. It has gone way up in terms of how many folks felt this was a big need in their communities. And I think those of you might have seen a recent news story that said once students who are having some different issues are identified, they're not able to get in to get help and follow-up and counseling and different things in the community for 6 months to a year. And so really, while we may be able to identify some of the needs, we need greater partnerships and greater capacity, really, in our community to help meet the needs of these students. So that's really a critical feature. When it comes to making friends and Link Crew and Web Crew, those are great programs. I absolutely agree with you. We should focus on that at the elementary level. To give you an example, at some of our middle schools, they're doing, you did a 17-second moment of silence today at the beginning of the board meeting. They're doing What's Your 17? Do 17 acts of kindness for someone. Smile at 17 people you haven't smiled at before. Have lunch with 17 people you haven't sat with before. Those types of things, those conversations are ongoing in our schools all the time, but particularly in our middle schools tomorrow when it comes to recognizing this kind of day. So we hope to continue to build our social emotional supports at all of our schools, but we also want to build that partnership and capacity with our community as well.
Excellent answers. Thank you. Last, very much shorter. Apologize. It's two parts. One, I want to bounce off to the Amherst Police Department. I'm not sure if you're aware, I had not put a lot of thought into this previously, but when I was attending the NYSBA conference in Lake Placid back in October, there was a vendor on the floor that offered a unique product. And again, at the time, I didn't put a lot of thought to it. I thought it was very interesting, very cool, and kind of walked away. It's certainly something from a district's point of view that we could look into, but I feel that probably the product should belong maybe in the Amherst Police Department's hands versus a district. And it was a piece of software that automatically monitored all facets of social media within a certain boundary. So you literally would set up and say the town of Amherst, and it would start looking for key characteristics, not key words, but traits, things that it was almost, and I don't mean to lean into saying that it's truly artificial intelligence, but it was in the sense that it was almost self-learning in the sense that it was able to try and find characteristics of posts that might be something to be cautious about. Now, obviously, these have to be public posts, not private, but a lot of times we find that things, people that are contemplating suicide or contemplating a school shooting or something like that, they're putting the signs out there in the social media. I have no idea the cost of this or anything like that. I don't even know the name of the vendor, so I can't even point you in the right direction, but I did want to at least point that out to you and say there was a vendor that was offering this, and it might be something to consider. Because any security plan, there's no, and you know this,
Sure.
There's no one given answer. There's no one solution. I mean, do we make the school into a jail and then have metal detectors at the door? No, it's not going to solve the problem. Do we do just mental? It's not going to solve the problem. It's a multifaceted approach like any security. So just a thought for another tool out there. Please.
I can comment on that because you're exactly right. It's got to be an approach from every angle with every asset that we have. And we have a intelligence unit within the police department, and they do similar things that you're talking about. It's not automated, it's not a program, but we partner with the Erie County Analysis Center. And whether it's for criminal purposes or for social networking purposes, they have that kind of software available to law enforcement if it's needed. So it is available in the County of Erie. We partner with the State Fusion Center so that We all don't have it in our individual departments, Depew, Amherst, Cheektowaga, Tonawanda. We're trying to consolidate those assets and share information to a greater degree, and we have direct access to that through our intelligence unit. So programs similar to what you're talking about are being used as we speak.
That's great to know. Dr. Martzoff, our next steps for consideration, you put down a lot of ideas here. What's our next step? What do you suggest? What can the board do? What does the district need to do? What's the next step?
I think it's all a process, Mr. LeMay. You look at, I would hope the board would look at threat assessment in schools as a starting point. I think is a great way to have a baseline for what some of the concerns can be and why those concerns exist. But we're going to continue to evaluate this, continue to talk to the experts at the Amherst Police Department. We're going to ask them to perform a security audit at each of our schools. That's going to take some time. And then we're going to begin to implement some suggestions and bring them before the board to the degree that we can. There may be some suggestions, by the way, that we bring to the board in executive session, because there are certain things as it relates to school security that we do not share out publicly, that are very private, because we don't want to create unwanted risk. So I hope everyone understands that. But we will be bringing more information and ideas forward and things that we're going to implement to continue to improve school security in our school district.
Any last comments or questions?
Just go.
Please, Mrs. Vasquez.
You raise your hand first.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for your service to not only our district, but to our community. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Siri, for the work that you've done regarding this issue. I do think that although, this national conversation has gotten a lot of traction recently because of recent events, of course, and that's how it goes. Something happens in the country and then, all this conversation happens, but then we sort of taper off until the very next tragic event happens. What we really need to do as a district and as a community is look at, and I don't know how we do that I don't even know if we can do that as a board, but we really need to look at legislation. And we need to talk to our legislators about common sense gun legislation. And I know it's not a board issue, it's not something that we as a board can handle, at this table, but, the commonality of these things are bump stops and high capacity magazines and military style weaponry. These are the common thread of these mass shootings that are taking place and killing our kids. And we really need to look at that in a common sense way and really talk to our legislators and talk to the powers that be in a very collaborative voice, in one voice, and say enough is enough. How many 5-year-olds are we going to bury? How many funerals of teenagers are we going to attend? Because we can't seem to get this thing right. And that's what the students in Florida have been spearheading, and that's what we need to continue to strive for, is this common sense legislation. I mean, as far as common sense background checks, age appropriateness of guns, responsibility of gun ownership, and by all means, this military weaponry has to stop. We don't need to have, in my opinion, who needs to have a military style machine gun in their possession? For what reason is that? Even if you're a hunter, which I am not, but even if you're an avid hunter, are you hunting deer with a military style weapon? No. So, I mean, these are things that we need to look into, and these are things that we need to stop, because our children are dying, and it's terrible. And we're talking about it now, and it's tragic, and it hurts our hearts, because we all have children, and who wants to see these things happen? But this conversation is going to fade in the next few days and weeks and months until the next tragedy happens, and we need to do something in the interim.
Thank you. Any other comments? Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Would someone like to make a motion to resolve to approve the property tax settlements as presented? Mrs. Beeger, thank you. Over a second. second? Dr. McCleary, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimous.
Abstention.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, sir. Motion carries 801. If you have any liaison or conference reports, please pass them to Mrs. Carey. Please send your reports within 2 days of a meeting if at all possible. Does anyone need any coverage for any upcoming meetings?
No.
You're eyeing. Mrs. Van Sice.
I do just have a question. Are you receiving our liaison reports at this time?
Officially today at 3 o'clock I was.
Okay. So the one that I sent last week, I wonder where that went.
Try to find it, Susan. I'll try to find it.
Okay, if not, I can just rewrite it. I just realized that today that you were not receiving. I had heard a potential you weren't.
I will work on getting
Okay.
that. Since you did send it last week, I will look into getting that, retrieving that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any legislative matters that anyone would like to discuss? Okay. There are no curriculum matters to discuss this month, as well as there are no personal matters to discuss this month. Dr. Martzloff, would you like to give us a proposed repair reserve project update, please?
Sure. There's a listing of proposed repairs for the repair reserve projects that are in your packet for your perusal, and we're happy to take any questions anyone has on those items.
Mrs. Leatherbarrow.
I had one, and I just recall something about the parking lot expansion between Casey and North, or a driveway expansion, or was it something? A widening?
Matursky?
The entrance area between the, what we call the horseshoe in front of North High School that comes in here. There's that little jog of the road that comes to the Casey parking lot. We're going to expand that so that the corner cut is less severe. So right now you see it's the other side, there's the wood fencing that has been put up. Right in that area, we want to expand that cut so that the person coming toward Casey will have an easier turn.
Is that to accommodate the buses easier, or just regular?
Regular traffic.
Okay, got it.
Any other comments or questions from the board members? Nope. Okay. We will now have our public hearing for the proposed repair reserve projects as presented. Would anyone like to address the board in the community, in the forum here, in the audience? If so, please come to the podium, sign in, state your name, and give us your address as well, please. Please take your time. Nobody commenting? We'll close the repair reserve public hearing. Would someone like to make a motion to resolve to adopt and approve the repair reserve funding as presented? Mrs. Van Sice, thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Beeger, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 800. There are no special needs and student matters to discuss this month. Does anyone have a request or matter to discuss under Committee of the Whole? Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, I have a few things, but given the time, I'll try to be as brief as possible. So one issue that came to my attention is a lot of our students go to after-school activities through the town of Amherst Youth and Rec, and there were some concerns as to the security involved with those, because here in our own facilities they may be locked during the day. There might be a point of entry, but it doesn't appear that that's the case with some of these after-school programs, and I think it'd be worthwhile for our district to reach out to Youth and Rec, the town of Amherst, to inquire as to what they're doing and see, if maybe they can do something in line with what we already do for our own facilities. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Mrs. Beeger?
It's interesting you say that. Just at the Heim PTA meeting last night, we were talking about school safety at length, and they're very careful about keeping doors locked during the day. Then we made the comment that in the evening when we came for the PTA meeting, one of the doors was open. There's so many different people accessing the buildings in the evening, and the principal commented they're so careful with protocol during the school day, but in the evening the rules change with who is there. So I think it's a valid concern. Are you thinking more in school buildings or when our students leave to go elsewhere?
Well, I'm thinking that, I know, for instance, Youth and Rec has a facility on Sheridan where a lot of students go to. I've volunteered a handful of times for some of their events. And while there's staff members there, anyone can walk in or out of the building. So, if you're talking about soft targets, children being a soft target, and you want to secure them while they're at school, why wouldn't you want to secure them when they're all together at those facilities? That falls outside of our ability to do, but it's not outside of our ability to ask the town to beef up their own security for that. And I don't know that they don't have that in place. I'm just saying we should inquire with them from the district. So presumably that would be Scott or someone else from administration.
Can I address the question? We looked at this possibility about 5 years ago when it comes to security in our schools, and it was determined at the time that we have so many different groups utilizing our school facilities in the evening and after school hours and on weekends that it would be problematic to continue to secure those doors. For example, you have the PTSAs, you have community groups, you have athletic groups, you have community education within the district that uses all of our schools all the time. We have hundreds of events going on, and so while we could do something with the town of Amherst as a possibility to sort of quote unquote lock things down, it would be very challenging to expand that to all of the groups. I'm not sure how we would manage that.
Well, Scott, just to clarify, I think the issue that I'm touching on is distinct from that, because what I'm saying is that the town of Amherst has their own programs that they run separate from our schools through their youth and rec department. Those programs are attended heavily by students from our district. But whereas we during the school day have locking mechanisms and points of entry, it's not clear that they do. And I think it's in this district's interest to know the security of these facilities that our students are going to.
I'm sorry, so maybe I misunderstood you, Mr. Meyer. Are you saying talk to them about the security at their own facilities that include our kids?
Yes, and to ask if there is nothing in place to better secure their facility. I know we can't force their hand.
Yeah, we have no problem in doing that. I would certainly make that overture to them. I thought you meant when town of Amherst programs are within our schools.
No, that's not what I meant, although I think maybe that's what Mary was speaking to.
Okay, I misunderstood your question.
Not a problem. So that was the opposite of brief. But does anyone else want to comment on that before we move on to number 2?
Well, I'll just follow up to say, interestingly enough, I was speaking to our schools in the evening because that was something that was mentioned specifically by parents at the meeting. I understand that's difficult to do given the amount of different groups that are in and out, but it's worthy of a conversation.
Okay, so second item I wanted to discuss briefly, and I've mentioned this before, but we actually had a student tonight, I think it was the Will South student rep that came up and spoke on this. The idea of putting together a committee, and this committee would be comprised of presumably people from administration, from the individual schools, from the PTSA, students themselves, with the objective being to review school security from building to building, and it'll serve as a way of collecting all these ideas and filtering it back to the board, because what I find right now is you have scattershot kind of ideas and commentary on how we can better improve our school safety. But if you have a formal committee for this purpose. It's a good way of collecting all that information. I think that people from all of those different interest groups would be very interested in serving on that committee. And it'd be, I think, a very collaborative and productive way to filter information and come up with new ideas that we may or may not want to implement. But I don't know what the interest level is from other members of the board. So I'm just bringing it up tonight so that I can hear your thoughts.
I love the idea of the organization of that. I like the idea of all stakeholders having a voice. One of the reasons that I asked about that other committee, the BOCES one, was because I was curious if all schools were represented. I guess my question would be, is there anything like that currently in place? Are there plans to do something in that fashion? I know that the PTSA Council has been reaching out to the different PTAs and asking PTAs to give their input as to what they feel priorities would be to make their specific schools safer. And so I know that that's one way the district is kind of outreach to parents and communities. So I love the idea of ensuring that all people are heard, and also that it's not, we have pieces of information everywhere, but that it's organized. Is the district currently working to do something like this, aside from what the PTSA Council's efforts have been over the past few weeks?
Dr. Martha?
I think, we mentioned the safety committee that meets 4 times a year. Perhaps to get at what Mr. Meyer is asking about might be a way to expand the membership of that group so that it is more representative of people in each school community, if that makes sense. I don't want the group to get too large and too unwieldy to come up with good ideas and recommendations, but perhaps we could have some parents or some community members, someone from the police department, for example, just expand the group a little bit to make it more a cross-section of representative of the district, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Any ideas, an idea worth discussing. I think that group, though, is an Erie One BOCES group, correct?
No.
That's a district group? Okay, and who's on that?
I think Mr. Matursky mentioned it earlier. There's at least one representative from every school. Includes teachers, includes principals, includes Dr. Sierri, Mr. Matursky, Mr. Langlots, who's our director of facilities. So there's a number of folks that are already there. We would be looking to expand the membership to kind of accommodate your idea.
Yeah, so I guess my thought then would be to add people onto that committee, include our PTSA, and then task them with more distinct objectives, namely reviewing each school and compiling their thoughts on how to better secure each facility. And then we can consider those as potential action items for the board. Because there's no way for this board to go school by school and know it thoroughly and know the security of each school thoroughly. And that's, in my view, the purpose of committees and delegating that kind of task to other people.
Nothing against the people that would be added to such a committee, but I would rely on the Amherst Police Department. They're really the experts that are going to look at our schools and make recommendations, and far be it for me to sort of second guess or change or alter, what they're saying we need to focus more on based on, a committee who might have different feelings about it, but we need to base it on the rationale and the research.
Sure, I wouldn't disagree with that. In fact, I would add them to the committee.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ms. Van Cise.
I would just are we done with that topic or no?
Mr. Meyer, are we all set?
We need.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think adding is a great idea to add to the current committee. I would feel more comfortable with that because we certainly don't want to have multiple committees or just parents and students meeting without our leadership, our teachers, our APD, because people's wish lists become wantless, and we could be, trying now to say this person wants this person wants this. So I think that they can be involved to be part of the process, but I think that would be great for that committee just to expand it and not to have individual committees at each school. I think the safety committee already for the safety plans of each building is very accurate and concise, and I feel very comfortable with that. But adding, I think, is an excellent suggestion.
All right, so if I'm hearing the board correctly, even though only a few of you have spoken, I will go ahead and formulate my own idea of what I think the committee should look like in terms of adding people, and then I'll come up with my own objectives for that committee, and then I'll present it back and see if you want to, vote on that in the affirmative or not.
Okay.
And I just have one more comment.
Yes, Mrs. Van Zyse.
I hope this is the proper time to say it, but I did just want tonight to recognize Anna. Although I'm thrilled to know that you're going to be starting the next chapter in your life, I, along with so many, are extremely sad to hear that you will be leaving us in October. And I just want to thank you for your incredible diligence and outstanding commitment for 21 years of service to Williamsville. So thank you.
I'll reserve my speech for October, but maybe on this side of the bench, maybe over there, but. Any other questions or comments?
Well, again,
Mr.
I
Meyer.
feel like I'm dominating the mic, but I did say there were three items, and this one actually piggybacks off of Ms. Vasquez's very well-spoken comment at the end of the presentation that our police department put on. And that's in relation to assault weapons, and she touched on it right on point. There is nothing we can do directly, but underlying all of this are the assault weapons, right? I mean, we're talking about what happens once a shooter gets into our school, which is really, frankly, it's sad to even have to look at it through that lens. And unfortunately, we have to rely on politicians and legislation to be able to address these kind of weapons. And so, as we've done in the past with other items like the lack of funding from the federal government, we've done joint letters from this board requesting certain kinds of legislative action. My opinion on this is that there should be an assault weapons ban, and I think there's a lot of support for that, and I do think that that is a district interest, because the end result is dead kids, and if that's not an interest for this district, I don't know what it is. And so I encourage and I would sign that letter, but obviously we would need at least a majority of the board to concur with that opinion.
So are you asking for the?
I'm asking if this board will do a joint letter requesting our legislative representatives to support an assault weapons ban.
Is there any discussion on it before we look to it? Anybody want to comment on it? Their thought? Mrs. Leatherbarrow?
Just my 2 cents is that there's always something that we can do. I never think that we should feel powerless. And I do think we should hold our lawmakers accountable. And if one thing we can always do is we can vote them out. And so I would be in support of something like that.
In support of something like the joint letter, Teresa? Okay.
Any other comments on it? Mr. Mecca?
I agree with a lot of what you said. I would probably want more information, and in general, I'm worried about reaching too far beyond the scope of our duties, just in general. Although I don't often feel that way, but I have a lot of friends that are gun owners and supporters of this kind of thing, and I don't think we should trample on anybody's rights, but I want to make sure what we're talking about when we talk about assault ban, a ban on assault weapons and all this kind of thing. So a little more clarification probably for me would make me more comfortable maybe, but I'm on the fence, I suppose, on this issue.
Other comments, questions? Dr. Martzloff, I don't want to put you on the spot here, so you can kick me here if you'd like me to be quiet, but, okay, enough said. What's your opinion on the board putting together a letter or a resolution like this?
I think the board can put together a resolution or a letter on anything it wants. My thinking on Mr. Meyer's proposal is perhaps it should be expanded to include 3 or 4 different ideas that would be enhancing school security and safety, whether it be assault weapons bans, whether it would be more funding for school security measures, whether it be school security measures are exempt from the tax cap calculation, whether it would be, fill in the blank, a number of different things that you could propose and offer as options for our legislators. So if there are certain legislators that don't want to change gun laws, for example, there may be other things that they would be willing to do to enhance security and safety in schools that you could have in such a letter. So maybe someone on the board would like to take a try at drafting something together and let the board review it at our next meeting, and we can perhaps send it along to our legislators. We've done it in the past with testing issues, teacher and principal evaluation issues, things that impact our school community. And school safety certainly impacts our school community.
Mrs. Speaker.
I absolutely support that idea because here we're talking about we have so many things in place to make our schools safe, yet there's so many improvements we can always do. And those improvements, for the most part, are not free. And we're about to start our budget work session, and I'm sure there's not money falling out of trees for us to do the kind of work we'd love to do to make our schools even safer, or have more police officers, or all these things that we want to do to keep our kids safe. I agree with your sentiments completely as far as assault weapons. I also think that it's important that we make the point that if we're going to reach out to legislators, that there are so many components to this, and school safety, keeping our kids safe, is important. And how do we fund that? There's so many. The budget is such a tricky thing. But if we're going to look at more mental health support, if we're going to look at actual structural issues, where does all that funding come from? And I think it's a great idea to advocate for it and ask for it and demand that we have more resources to make sure our kids are safe. I like the idea of drafting a letter.
Mr. Macko?
I reframed the way Dr. Martzloff brilliantly reframed it. I'm totally in support of that idea. Putting a letter together about what we might want legislators to do to enhance school security, I think that's excellent. I'm a little more iffy on the gun control issues, but like I think Dr. Martzloff suggested, if we put a letter together and start looking at it and give feedback to each other, I think we could probably come up with something that we would all agree upon.
Mrs. Vasquez?
Dr. McCleary was,
No.
she was next, actually.
I was just going to quickly say that I support the idea of the letter that perhaps has more facets to it.
Oh, not me, thank you.
Now you?
I was just going to say that I'd be happy to help draft that letter. I'd be happy to do that.
Mr. Meyer, before you make your closing comments on this, because I see you're ready. I was on the fence. While I personally might agree with many more laws being required regarding gun control, the availability of assault weapons, background checks, etc., those are my personal beliefs. I'm not quite sure how that necessarily came into the district level, other than at the level of security. But with Dr. Martzloff's comments, and I was actually going to suggest the same prior to him, thanks for stealing my points, I would love to have a letter drafted more broadly, but specifically still addressing those issues. I have no concerns with you putting in this letter, that being one of the items, but I'd love to see advocate for funds for potentially SRO officers, potentially more school counselors. I'd like to, again, come back to that broad approach, that multifaceted approach to look at this problem to be solved. And I'd love to see politicians come to bat and say, you know what, each school district, here's $10 million. This is how we suggest you spend it, and put it to good use for something like this. So I would be behind that. And with that, you've got 6 people already that have nodded their heads to that idea. So I would say if that's acceptable to you, go ahead and start working and take advantage of Mrs. Vasquez and put the letter together.
Yeah, I have no objection to putting other things in that letter. I mean, the whole point of this part of our agenda here is to have a collaborative kind of discussion on something that's not quite yet an action item. So I appreciate all of your thoughts and insights. And Ms. Vasquez, if you want to work on that letter with me, I'd be happy to do that with you.
Absolutely.
May I ask one last item to be put into it, something that hasn't been brought up tonight that I want to encourage our politicians not to reconsider, and that would be to allow teachers to have guns in schools. I know a certain politician or two have already gone on the record that they'd like to change that law. Teachers are teachers. They need to teach.
No, I agree with that sentiment.
Great. Moving on, I have something that technically falls under the committee of the whole, but it also falls under correspondences here. And I realized in our agenda order that we're going to go into public expression and then come into correspondences. So in the future, we might want to look at changing that around and putting public expression at the very, very end. So I'm going to hold the thought, and I'm going to break for a second here and conduct our second public expression. This will have all the same rules as outlined in our first public expression. Anyone wishing to address the board should go to the podium now. Please sign in and state your name and address. And we have 2 people right up there. Do we have a clipboard up there?
There's a clipboard.
There is a clipboard up there. Perfect. Thank you.
I would just like to thank the Board of Education for your extensive consideration of the issue at hand and for your eloquent remarks regarding all of the different options that we as a district have. I hope that going forward, I know that going forward you will continue to consider this issue, and I would just like to say, Ms. Vasquez and Mr. Meyer, if there's anything that the student organizers can do to help you in your efforts to draft that letter to legislators or anything like that, we would be happy to do so. I can give you my email address or anything like that, Ms. Vasquez. I know you're on Interhigh. I'll be there later this week. So yes, thank you guys so much for your serious consideration of this issue. It means a lot to us as student organizers, and we would just like to thank you.
Ask if I can be on your campaign when you run for senator or House of Representatives in a few years. I'm happy to assist you in any way possible. You're an eloquent speaker and a true advocate for what's right and what you believe in. And I've heard your name brought up literally dozens of times from the administration and faculty and staff at South High School. So keep up the great work.
Thank you so much.
Hello, my name's Amy Hurd. Do you need my address, or is it okay just being here?
Write it in there.
Okay. I'm actually a substitute teacher's aide here, and I just wanted to bring up, I have never been trained on a lockout drill or lockdown drill, but I have experienced it, and I've got to say it was a little, probably terrifying is too strong a word, but I was as nervous as some of the younger students. I was in an elementary school because I had never walked through it. I happened to be in the hall. The majority of teachers immediately closed the doors and did what they were supposed to do. I was able to get into a classroom as they were closing the door, but I didn't know what to do from an adult standpoint. So I guess I'm just asking maybe if the substitute aides could have some training on that. We probably get forgotten about a little bit because we're not there consistently. But I think it's definitely something, if we're trying to pull together and keep our kids safe, I know I would feel a lot better having proper training as to what to do in these instances. That's it. Thank you.
Anyone else for public expression tonight? Nope. I'm going to open it up to correspondences. Anybody have anything to share with the board? Mrs. Leatherbarrow, please.
I did get an email sent to me earlier today that I did forward regarding what I mentioned earlier, a little bit about transportation during the school day. And I realize now it falls more under looking at the field trip policy than it does at than the transportation policy. But I did just want to mention that the parent was requesting that all parents be notified, not necessarily that a written permission slip needs to be on file, but just that there be notification when a child is being moved from one building to another building within the district during the instructional day. So I'm just sharing that correspondence.
Great, thank you. Any other correspondences? I did receive one. I won't read it. I did forward it to the board. It was from a Mr. Charles Molnar. And he is asking the board to look into the possibility of the Cold War Veterans Exemption Tax. I don't know enough information about this. I know in 2015 the board voted on the Veterans Tax, and my understanding at that point was that tax did not include the Cold War, and the state decided to add that in the year after that. I'm not looking to open up to discuss this publicly at this time to get anybody's opinions or to formulate, if we should vote on this at this time. I don't have enough information. I have speculation, and I know I've mentioned a couple of things to a few of you. At this point, I'm just looking to see that if there's enough support to at least ask the district to, one, look into it to see what the impact would be, what the law is, what the financial impact is, what the burden would be, how many people could be exempted, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, to get us the back info that I'm not an expert on, and I don't have at this time. Mr. Mecca?
I agree with your request. When we do that, can we verify that this would cover all veterans then, along with the previous veterans exemption, just to be sure that we're not leaving anybody out in the cold, so to speak?
Understanding it is, but again, I'm not anywhere near an expert, so yes, I agree. We need to get clarification on that as well. There's a lot of questions that I know we've come up with a half a dozen of them, and I'm sure there's more. So, with that being said, can I get at least 5 nods? 4 nods? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we'll ask the district at some point in the future if they could do that, please. Would someone like to make a motion to recess the regular board meeting? Mrs. Beeger, thank you. Is there a second? Dr. Benader, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 8-0-0. I would like to call the regular budget work session to order. All board members are present, sort of. One has stepped out momentarily. We'll be back. Dr. Martzoff, would you like to review the 2018-2019 budget development presentation with us, please?
Sure. I would like to start off this evening with acknowledging the various budget reduction items we've had over the years. I think it would be critical for the board to understand that we've had some very challenging years from a budgetary standpoint, and I want to share some information about those with you. And the reason we do that is because our number one goal always is to preserve programming, and where we can enhance a little bit what we do for our students across the district. We also want to provide fiscal responsibility and accountability to our school community. We want to prioritize whatever the reductions might be so that they're as far away from student learning in the classroom as possible. And then always look for efficiency savings. There's different ways we can save dollars, like through our cooperative purchasing program, for example. So all of these things lead us to try to save money. And if we go back the past 7 years, in 2011-12, we increased class sizes. We eliminated 5th grade languages other than English. We reduced home and careers and technology instruction at the middle school level down to state minimums. We cut equipment and supplies. We reduced some of the team leader positions, reduced teacher aides, and reduced technology staff members. and that was almost $5 million. Moving forward to the next year, we again increased class sizes. We eliminated the Elementary Ideas program. We eliminated the GED program. We reduced team leader positions by almost $500,000. We reduced physical education staffing at the secondary level. We had a voluntary administrative wage freeze amongst all of our administrators. We restructured summer school to save money. We also restructured our facilities department at that time, and we reduced equipment, supplies, conference attendance, and contractual services across the district. Moving forward to the next year, we reduced BOCES services. We had savings in the budget from retirements, from a retirement incentive that was enacted in the past. We had benefit savings in health insurance and Social Security because the number of employees decreased and the cost for benefits began to level out. We also had management and efficiency savings. We were able to apply as a district for a New York State Management Efficiency Grant, which we were granted, and we were able to not only show how we were saving money, but also get some additional revenue to the district for that effort. Moving forward into 2014-15, over $2.6 million due to staffing reductions through attrition due to enrollment shifts. Savings in retirement system payments. You started to see a decline there, and health insurance savings from going to a self-funded health insurance model for all of our health insurance plans. In 2015-16, we eliminated a middle school keyboarding program. We reduced BOCES services again by creating 2 new classes within the district. We had additional savings in the retirement system payments, and we also enjoyed some energy savings from our capital project work that had previously taken place, and those savings were applied to the budget. In 16-17, we had the rollback of the GEA, Gap Elimination Adjustment. If you'd like to review what that is, I have a video I can bring to the next board meeting and share it with everyone, but essentially we saw a large increase in New York State aid to the Williamsville Central School District for that year that was very helpful from a revenue standpoint. And then last year we had some reductions due to salary expense reductions due to retirements and also attrition. We had a decrease in staffing at the secondary level that helped us balance the budget. So over 7 years, we've eliminated programs, we've cut back programs, we've increased class sizes and had staff reductions, reduced team leaders, reduced teacher aides, and had equipment and supply cuts for a total of over $15 million in real budget cuts from the Williamsville Central School District. And as we move forward, we want to focus on keeping the true identity of our school district. We've used this phrase many times in the past. We want to keep Williamsville, Williamsville. It's a special place for students to be able to learn and grow, and we want to make sure it continues to be a special place. So our program continuation, looking at the 2018-19 preliminary budget, totals $3.6 million in employee salaries, $117,000 increase in BOCES services, a $200,000 increase in Social Security. Health insurance is projected to go up by $750,000. Exceptional education student services, we are adding in some additional classes for special education students, and that cost will be $505,000. And in student transportation, we're seeing a $250,000 increase for a total of $5,422,000. This makes our base budget at this juncture of the discussion $191,557,210. Going forward, we'd look to do some small additions to the budget. We would like to add 1 instructional coaching position. This is critical to our district as we continue to grow and enhance this initiative. If we do get additional aid to the Williamsville Central School District by April 1st, one of the areas we might want to look at is add a 2nd instructional coaching position if possible. We want to enhance academic intervention services for our students. It's important to support our students across the district before school, during school, and after school in this important area. We're going to look to implement some of the changes to enhance the administrative makeup at the elementary schools and high schools. This will be over a 3-year period, and what it'll entail is changing the current assistant administrators at the elementary schools from teaching positions to administrative positions. Most likely, they will be 10-month administrative positions to assist at the elementary level, but be full-time. That also helps to enhance safety. Certain times principals are out of the building for meetings and different things that are happening, and we think that'll be a positive move for the district. At the high school level, we have part-time teachers slash faculty managers that handle some of the athletic director duties at the high schools. We want to change those positions to an 11-month athletic director slash assistant principal position to help with administrative structure and support at the high school. And really this has to be done in that unit work on the administration side is currently being handled by teachers, and so we need to begin to make this move. And I want to thank the Williamsville Administrators Association for working with the district and being patient over a 3-year period to allow this to take place. District-wide, we need to increase professional development. We have undertaken at a number of our schools the units of study in conjunction with Columbia University, and we would like to expand that and offer much more professional development, particularly in that area, as the feedback we've received from our teachers has just been outstanding, and we want to be able to better support our teachers, particularly in that area. So going forward, this again boosts the budget a little more to just over $192 million. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Matursky, who will continue the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Martzloff. As we saw in our last meeting, our tax cap number for this year is 2.26%. And when we examine the state aid reports that we received in January, we have an estimated increase at this time of $1.6 million. There were a couple proposals in the governor's state aid plan, and one of those being the cap on 2% cap on certain aids, such as BOCES program expense, and also in building aid. And a calculation was done that if that were to occur in the current 18-19 year, we would lose $337,000 in building aid based on our current reports. The Assembly has recently rejected those proposals as of today, so we will see if they do make it into the final state budget. So looking at all of the revenue pieces together, we see that that $1.6 million in state aid is there. We also, at our tax levy increase of $2,697,000, which is under the tax cap, that's 2.24% increase, and we're able to add $50,000 in sales tax revenue. So that brings us to a preliminary revenue budget of $190,482,210, and again, that is below our New York State tax cap number. So when we look at what Dr. Martzloff mentioned as the total expense budget and compare it to our revenue budget, we have a decrease or a deficit of $1,550,000. So how we are addressing that is that we are fortunate that we have had some retirements already for this year provided to the district that will go into effect for the 18-19 budget, and we have some carryover savings from the prior year's retirement incentives, so we're able to reduce the budget by that same amount. That results in a preliminary budget of $190,482,210. The budget increase is $4,347,000, or 2.34%. The tax levy increase is 2.24%, as is the estimated tax rate increase being 2.24%. And once again, that is below the New York State tax cap number of 2.26%. So what does this mean to the tax bill? On a home assessed at $150,000, if you have the basic star exemption, it would result in an annual increase of $43.43. If you have an enhanced star exemption, it would be an increase of $29.96. And looking at how our tax rates and tax levies and budget increases have been over the last few years, you can see that we have this year, we're looking at 2.24% for both tax rate and tax levy and 2.34% for budget. It's important to point out that every single year we have been under the tax cap. The other thing I'd like to point out here is that if you look at the tax rates, those rates have actually usually been lower than what's projected because the district does not receive the actual assessed value information that is used in August to project the final rates until the end of July. So if you were to look at this, the average increase on the tax rate over those years, not including 17-18, which is the reassessment year, is 1.24%. And a point to be made is that really can represent what the true increase would have been of our budget and tax rates on a homeowner's policy, not considering any assessment changes, but that's what the district has provided. So we've been very much lower than what we have stated in the levies as well as the tax rates due to the fact that we're using estimated rates.
So in talking about what does the budget accomplish in terms of the preliminary budget, it maintains current level of academic and extracurricular programming. Its tax levy increase is below the state-imposed cap. It adds instructional support for students such as academic intervention services, supports increased professional development for teachers, and adds an instructional coach and strengthens the administrative support at elementary and at the high schools. So going forward from this evening on March 27th, we have a budget work session where we will begin to see state aid crystallizing for the district, and we should have a better idea of where that's going to land. And then on April 10th, we'll look to submit the budget to the board for it to be adopted so that we can conduct our budget hearing and, of course, our May 15th vote on the annual budget and school board election. So happy to answer any questions from the board at this time.
Mr. Meyer?
Could you elaborate a bit on what we're doing about the deficit? You said we were shy by 1 point something million, I think.
What we're doing is we're reducing the salary budget lines by $1,550,000, and that's the ability to do so is the difference in what would have been the current year salaries to the retirements and the lower salaries that we're paying the replacement teachers that are coming in, and the savings that have yet to be realized from last year's retirement incentive that we will be also adding to it. So that's where the dollars for the reductions are coming from.
Okay, and is that an estimate? Are we estimating that that'll be sufficient, or do we know that it'll
be sufficient?
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Mecca?
I don't know if you know much about this at this time or not, but there has been a proposal from Mark Polenkars for districts to consolidate. And along with that, I think there's some plan to use the sales tax money in different ways. Do we know anything about this and how that might impact our district, or is that not anything to worry about at this time?
Mr. Mecca, you are aware Mr. Polenkars actually used the Williamsville district in a positive light when he made that announcement.
I saw that relative to Cheektowaga's school districts and our efficiency with administrative functions. I just wasn't sure if there might be an impact down the line for us with respect to sales tax revenue.
Mr. Matursky, you want to comment, and then I'll follow up with a couple comments?
At this time, there's really not a lot of information that has come out of that. I think what I had heard and read was that the withholding of sales taxes to Erie County school districts would be somewhat of a last effort on their end to try and get consolidations to occur. But how that would happen, when that would happen, I think is not clear at this time.
Just say that based on Mr. Polenkar's proposal, that he seems to be echoing what the governor has previously said a number of years ago when it comes to school district consolidations. And in New York State, school district consolidations are studied all the time. And there's an extensive process that takes place, and ultimately there's a referendum in each school community, and only 15% of them that are proposed ever get approved for school district consolidations. And really, the savings, aren't that great. Are there some savings that could be found? Sure there are. But in terms of the amount of money that could be saved, it's really, from studies that I've seen, even from UB, doesn't seem to indicate there'd be a tremendous amount of savings, but it is something that he's brought up. As far as sales tax revenue and withholding that, I think that's been tried in other counties across the state of New York, and it hasn't been successful. So it would be unfortunate if we had to get into that battle, but hopefully that won't happen.
Thank you both.
You're welcome.
Other questions, comments from the board members? I just have one. I just want to get confirmation here. I'm flipping through the slide presentation here, and I think I found the answer. This budget is including the expense budget, the program support considerations for $475,000, correct? This is included with this? So we believe we're going to be able to do that? Okay, thank you for confirmation on that. That's the only question I have. Any other board members, anything before we open it up to the public?
Just one comment. I think it's excellent. I just want to make sure, I know we said maintains, but with that you had mentioned bus transportation. We're giving additional monies for that, correct? And then we're even having additional special ed classrooms on top of, so that's part of the continuation on top of the program support that we're having. So I think it's excellent. Thank you very much. I think it's a very well-rounded budget, and we're able to maintain and include so many important things too. So I'm very pleased with it.
Thank you, and a great deal of credit, of course, goes to Mr. Matursky, as it does every year with the school budget, and an entire leadership team, all the work that they've done, and collaborating with our principals and administrators and teachers and staff across the district to bring the ideas forward for consideration. So far so good, and we'll keep our fingers crossed for some additional New York State aid that we can utilize to, perhaps enhance a little bit more.
I'll mention kudos. It's definitely a very long process. I know that you guys, I think, especially Mr. Matursky, probably come June 1st are starting the process all over again, getting ready for the next year. It never ends. So I appreciate it. It's the stellar leadership, I think, of this district that keeps us so fiscally in check with our budgets, and keeps us, on the front like we are right there. So I can't begin to thank you all for the hard work, Superintendent, your team, and everybody. So thank you. We'll now have our public forum for the budget only. This is a forum for anybody in the audience who'd like to come up and address the board, ask any questions. This is an opportunity for two-way dialogue. We just ask that you limit your questions related to the budget only, please. So would anybody like to address the board? If so, please come up to the podium, sign in, state your name and address.
Good evening, Ron Schubert. Mr. LeMay, you opened the door, so here I am. I'm a little disappointed. First of all, I'm very happy to see the gap has been closed, but I also noticed there was nothing in the budget for additional social workers. I think we've talked and talked and talked over the years about needing more social workers. I don't see any. I think I'm going to say it again, it's now up to this board. I'm not on this board anymore. I think it's up to this board to make sure that we increase the number of social workers in our schools. We've been talking about it for years. There's room in this budget, I'm sure, to just start that process. I'm not talking about putting an additional social worker in each school, but I'm certainly talking about starting that effort. It took me almost 5 years just to get one social worker, which is ridiculous. So I'm going to suggest to this board that you look at increasing the number of social workers. There is room in this budget, and I would suggest it's not over yet. Take a look at the budget again and see if you can do that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schubert. I share a lot of those same concerns. I mentioned that earlier. I would ask the board and the district for the consideration that if we do find extra money, especially from the state, if some miracle comes through and that money tree suddenly starts to produce for us, instead of adding more counselors and coaches, coaches, I think I'd like to see us maybe share that and try and add some more counselors and or social workers, even if it's in a shared environment between the buildings. But that's my request.
May I ask, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask at this time, how many social workers we currently have in each building, or if social workers are shared across buildings?
We have at least one in every school, and we have some with multiple FTEs as social workers, depending on what programs are offered at the specific school.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mrs. Leatherborough, please.
I think it's important to point out on that issue that our schools also utilize what's considered an SST, so a student support team. So even though there might be, X number of social workers in each building, there is a substantial team that meets those needs, whether it's school counselors, teachers, administrators, everyone working together, and even in conjunction with our Amherst Police Department, as we heard tonight. So I don't see a lack in terms of providing these supports to our students.
Mrs. Van Syce, sorry.
And of course, we all would love more social workers. I was actually quite pleased. Not to say that we never want to move in that direction. We want to keep the door opens to have additional. But I was pleased to see when we received the email the amount of mental health professionals that are offered at each building. And I really liked the idea that was in there about more interaction with adults for the children. So there's things within the school systems that can also help, like teachers building the relationships, maybe during their off period, a CP duty, where they have 5 students that on a rotational basis they meet with to build relationships and to have that connection. So, there's also things, and I think, you have ideas and programs that you're still rolling out that will help when we don't have the funding to be able to bring this in, that there's other ways that we can go about still having, targeting mental health and making connections with children.
Mr. Mecca?
I think Dr. Marsloff stated at the beginning of the day, not the presentation, but the first meeting, that we would always like to have more, and we're going to try to maximize our resources as much as we can. I also want to note that I would be remiss if, since nobody said the word school psychologist at this point,
right?
That's my profession.
They're overrated.
Got to put a plug in for the school psychologist, also part of the mental health staff and team. But of course, if we will look at staffing levels, and we have been looking at them as these national tragedies have occurred. We have been in contact with the superintendent as a board to discuss staffing levels of mental health professionals in the schools.
Mrs. Beer.
Something I didn't mention at first, but I do want to say, I see an investment here in professional development, and you mentioned particularly around units of study, and I want to say how happy I am that our district is making that investment. I think it's an excellent instructional tool. I know I've seen an incredible difference in the reading and writing habits of my own 3rd grader this year as a result of this work. And I just, as an educator too, I'm familiar with this resource. I think it's fantastic that our district is willing to really invest, because I think this will make such an incredible difference and an increased volume of reading and writing and the abilities of our children, and not just abilities but capabilities to read more and create more and really be engaged in that work. It's not just dry test prep, it's really learning to read and write and be engaged in that process for real world situations. So kudos to the district for really investing in that. I think that our children are so lucky that we're supporting that work. Thank you.
No other questions or comments? Okay, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn the budget work session, please? Mrs. Leatherborough, is there a second? Mrs. Van Cise, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Would someone like to make a motion to return to the regular board meeting? Such protocols. Dr. Bernader, thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Van Cise, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Someone like to make a motion to meet in executive session to discuss employment matters relating to a particular person or persons, collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, and current litigation. Mrs. Van Cise, thank you. Is there a second? Dr. Bernader, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Would someone like to make a motion to return to public session? Dr. Bernader, thank you. Second? Mr. Mecca, thank you. All in favor? Abstentions? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Dr. Martzloff, do you have a motion for us, please?
Yes, I'd like to recommend to the Board of Education that the board place a transit middle school teacher on administrative leave until further notice pending the outcome of an investigation.
Okay. Can somebody?
Second.
Thank you. Actually, you'd be my first.
First.
Bernader, second. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Our next regular board meeting will be March the 13th. That is incorrect. I did not catch that. My apologies. Our next regular board meeting is
April 10th? Do we have
is April the 10th. However, we have a special board budget work session on March the 27th at 6 o'clock here in the district office. The next board meeting after that will be April the 10th here in district office starting at 7 o'clock. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn the regular board meeting? Dr. McClary, second. Mrs. Van Cise, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Have a good night.